The story began abruptly and unexpectedly. The leader of the hero Team Nardo announced the immediate exile of our heroine Aerys Falres. Stunned by the sudden turn of events, Harris thought, could this be some kind of joke? But Nardo's visible anger did not hint at any trickery. He wanted Aerys to disappear from his sight immediately. The people around stood and wondered what could have happened, watching this heated quarrel. However, they wisely kept their distance, not wanting to get involved in the conflict, and quickly disappeared before the situation escalated. Nardo admitted that Aerys's enhancement magic was indeed useful, but dismissed it. It was just a potion that could be easily replaced. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, he also declared that the party did not need such a burden. Nardo even accused Aerys of being a greedy experience thief. In this world, killing monsters gave experience points that made you stronger, and these points were divided equally among everyone in the group. Aerys understood their motive. They expelled him simply because they wanted more XP for themselves. When Aerys tried to explain, Nardo completely ignored his words, declared the dismissal final, and strictly ordered him to leave. Others also kept their distance, as if he just read the room and stepped aside. Before his final departure, Aerys asked one last time if they really did not mind that he was leaving the hero party. But they almost called him annoying, saying that they would finally get rid of such ballast as him. Has Aerys already left and moved on? He thought that this did not need explanations anyway. But it was clear that the team held only on his charms. Still, they rejected him, not understanding. Harris thought that they, as always, sooner or later would return and bring him back with worried faces, but now he firmly decided not to return. Harris joined the party of heroes to take revenge on the demon lord who took his family from him and to stop new troubles, but now that he is outside the party, his most important task is to put his own life in order. Thinking about his future, he resolutely decided to get an adventurer's license. Soon he arrived at the guild house and approached the receptionist, who gently extended her hand to help him. When Aerys said that he dreamed of becoming an adventurer, she instantly looked at the clock and said that he came just in time for the exam, then asked how exactly he wanted to proceed. He replied that, if possible, he would like to take the exam right now. She swiftly handed him the registration form to fill out, and he quickly wrote down his name and profession. A sorcerer who helps teammates with enhancement, magic, a skill he was born with. Has she already scanned the completed form? She timidly asked if he was connected to the group of heroes. Aerys noticed with surprise how quickly she recognized him just by his name and profession. Although he knew that if his expulsion from the hero party became known, it would cause a lot of trouble. Instantly gathering himself, Aerys dismissed any connection, saying it was a common name, and he was not involved with the hero squad at all. Then he slyly asked about the content of the exam to divert her attention. She explained that there were 4 in total. A magic power test, a target shooting test, a practical test, and finally the final test. She emphasized once again he needed to pass all 4, but he was allowed an unlimited number of attempts and was sincerely wished good luck. She led him to the hall where the test was to take place. At first, she led him to the room where they were to test magical power. For the first time since joining the hero's squad, Aerys had to measure his magical power, although he was confident he would pass. In the room, on a stand that stood on a pedestal, lay a single polished crystal carefully, and she placed her hand on it. She showed how the test worked. Touching the crystal absorbed magic and showed its power level. The brighter it shone, the stronger the magic, the dimmer, the weaker.
Asking if it can help him.
Single polished crystal carefully on power, she replied that it was difficult for her magic level, but if it shone even a little brighter, it would be accepted. She also noted that even without being an adventurer, she could handle a decent amount of magic, so for him, it shouldn't be too difficult, and Aerys pressed her hand to the crystal, resolutely deciding to try anyway. As soon as he touched the surface, it exploded with such a glow. Bright glow momentarily blinded the receptionist. Aerys thought that this noticeable beam meant he passed the test. When he turned to ask the receptionist about his result, her legs gave way and she fell, and he immediately wondered if he had made a mistake. She quickly apologized for her unexpected reaction and sincerely admitted that she had never seen anything like it before.
He receives a compliment.
And as he continued to pour his power into the crystal, it began to heat up to unbearable heat. He anxiously asked whether the crystal would withstand this strain or shatter into pieces. But she confidently assured him, the thing is reliable, she had never heard of such a thing. They could not believe their eyes. The crystal began to noticeably crack. And Chun-Un now talks with Zhang Xianfeng, looks at Aerys. Looking at this, began to doubt its meaning, and the administrator fell to the floor again. Trembling, she whispered aloud. She wondered how this could have happened. Even S-rank magic should have been reflected by the crystal, and now it began to seem to her that Aerys was truly from the hero party. But he instantly brushed off her suspicion, saying, "It's common sense. A mage from the hero party would not seek the fate of an adventurer." He reached out his hand to help her up, and most importantly, inquired about the test results. She quietly reassured him, "You undoubtedly passed the test." Meanwhile, he apologized for the trouble caused, and sadly admitted that with the broken crystal further tests were currently impossible. She, starting to examine the broken crystal, dryly remarked, "This is unexpected. The guild should have anticipated such a result in advance." She accidentally scratched her hand and started bleeding. Aerys immediately took her hand and noted that it was indeed a spectacular cut. He offered to heal her wound with his magic, and the wound quickly healed. She was amazed that Aerys, besides possessing magic, also knew how to heal. Usually, it was thought that mages used enhancement spells only for attack or defense, and only a few guessed that it was about granting some property. Without hesitation, he directly asked if there was any problem with him, as a mage, using healing magic, and she timidly answered, no. Moreover, he offered to fix the crystal, which impressed her so much that she even asked if it was really possible, and when he began to pour his healing magic into the broken crystal, the crystal noticeably began to restore and heal, and in a moment it was as if new. Seeing this miracle, she sincerely thanked him. Meanwhile, Aerys modestly admitted that at first it was his fault. He asked again if the next test was shooting at targets, and she confirmed it. He was told that he needed to hit the target either with magic or a sword, and the number of points scored would depend on the strength of his strike. Standing before the next trial, the receptionist smiled and declared that shooting at targets would be a breeze thanks to Aerys's magic, and Aerys himself, an enchantment mage, modestly asked not to expect too much from him. Emphasizing his role as support, he still believed in his heart that he could pass this test. Soon she led him to the testing ground, where several straw targets lay on the ground nearby. She showed how it was done, created a magical sphere, and struck the target with it, informing him that the target would glow depending on the strength of the attack. The condition for passing was simple: exceed your current attack power, and only the strongest of 3 attempts counted. She also allowed him to choose sword or magic for this test. He paused for a moment. He could enhance the sword with magic, but if he chose magic, he wouldn't need any tools at all. Still, he said that either option would do, but magic was more convenient, so he decided to use it. The receptionist, seeing how easily he considered both methods, was very surprised but agreed nonetheless. He decided to cast Fireball, a simple beginner spell available to many support roles. Having only 3 chances, he decided to use the beginner spell on the first attempt. And for the second, he aimed for a high score, cast an enchantment spell, and kept his plan firmly in mind. He formed an overly large ball of fire and hurled it toward the target. He began to realize that even a fireball has limits, but just as he turned around, he looked in surprise at the stunned girl at the reception. She called his abilities crazy and said she was blinded for a moment, and Aerys calmly assured her that he wasn't even really trying. As soon as the fog from the previous strike cleared, she was even more surprised to hear that he had not yet used all of his power. The receptionist stood stunned by the destruction. Not only was the target mannequin destroyed, the explosion had reached the neighboring mannequins as well. Aerys initially asked if the mannequins were supposed to break, but then dismissed it. They were definitely broken, so she considered this test passed. And for the last 2 attempts, she simply smiled and told him that he could stop. He had already easily passed the trial. She gestured toward the devastated arena and said that with such destruction, they could not even continue. Without saying a word, Aerys activated his healing magic and instantly restored the devastated area, repairing all the mannequins he had destroyed, and she immediately noted that although they could now continue the exams, there was no need to. Eventually, Aerys passed the shooting test by hitting the target with a single fireball. The next test was a practical exam. He would have to fight one-on-one against the examiner, an S-rank adventurer. Only those who were recognized as having passed this stage were allowed to take the final exam. Beginners usually rose to rank D then C by completing guild tasks and gaining practical experience. Adventurers of rank C and above were already considered experienced. So for the practical test, he had to take a risk to earn the approval of the examiner, a true adventurer. When he stepped onto the arena, he noticed he was not alone here. Many other candidates who had also come for the exam were already around. The receptionist smiled and said that it was rare for a person of Aerys's level to pass all the exams in one day. On the other side stood the examiner named Chris, and looking at the candidates, he noted that they looked significantly younger than him. He apologized for their wait and announced that he would be their opponent in the practical exam. He explained in detail, everyone must choose their fighting style for the dual sword or magic. the duel will end when one side is knocked out of the fight or surrenders, and exactly how the duel goes will determine whether they pass or fail. Then he confidently told them, "Approach me with a clear intention to win." Aerys raised his hand and, a little tensely, asked how the points would be counted, because their success depended on the duel's result. Chris explained that the exam was like a mirror of true demands. Essentially, they had to check whether the candidates were even capable of handling the final exam. It would test basic combat skills, the ability to handle crises, and the general ability to assess the situation. Hearing this, Aerys involuntarily thought that the criteria sounded too vague. Although the answer was not what he hoped for, he still decided to proceed and asked if it would count for him if he defeated Chris. Chris snorted confidently and declared that he would pass if he proved he was capable. He added victory would guarantee him passage, but he had never lost to any candidate who claimed that. Aerys thought although he was in a support role, he was still a member of the hero squad. The fight promised to be tough, but he was quite sure he would not lose. He was somewhat reassured by the thought that victory guaranteed him passage. Then Chris called the first candidate in line and invited her to step forward to challenge him. The girl stepped forward, and Aerys felt relief they had avoided the first confrontation, so he finally got time to properly think through the plan. When the battle flared up, the girl used her magical skills with all her might, and Aerys thought that someone so young must have a bright future. While Chris was preparing, Aerys noticed how he caught the flow of her magic and skillfully redirected the attack. Chris rushed at the candidate at full speed, and the girl clearly flinched. Aerys could not help but wonder, was she not expecting this complete failure? She was much more skillful than her peers, but it seemed that her arrogance was her downfall. In an instant, Chris's sword hovered over her neck, immediately surrendered. Chris assessed her skill. The attack was powerful, but when she failed to execute the preemptive strike, she was completely unprepared for what happened next. Chris said that with such skills, she does not deserve to pass. He advised her to try again next time, but only after she truly polished her skills. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she had no choice but to leave the hall. After her, it was Aerys's turn his move to compete. As soon as Chris reviewed the form, he was stunned there was an enhancement mage at the exam. Aerys also knew well that enhancement mages among ordinary adventurers were extremely rare. Professions granted by the heavens were often very specialized, unlike most, who were either wizards or swordsmen. There were true rarities, enhancement mages, healers, and even unique professions specializing in certain skills. Chris openly wondered whether enhancement mages really used magic. Aerys confirmed that he was counting on it, noting that he currently did not have a sword. Chris then informed a rule that Aerys clearly did not know. Candidates were forbidden to bring their own swords or staffs to the exam. They had to take them from the guild. He also said that swords could vary greatly in combat power. It all depended on their type. To keep everything fair, both candidates and examiners had to fight only with swords provided by the guild. Hearing this, Aerys decided without hesitation to borrow a sword from the guild. Chris did not waste time with a single gesture. He called the receptionist to bring another one. He also noted that he had never met anyone who could both use magic and wield a sword, called Aerys a magical swordsman, and added that such resourcefulness is useless if both his skills turn out to be half-hearted. The receptionist handed over the sword. The fight broke out, and Chris allowed Aerys to start it whenever he felt ready. There was a feeling in the air that Chris seemed to allow him to strike first again, but victory by a surprise attack did not bring joy. So he decided that the first strike would be cautious and moderate. At first, he cast 4 enhancement spells on himself. Movement became faster, attacks more frequent, strikes stronger, and accuracy sharper. After that, he also cast an enhancement enchantment on his sword. Meanwhile, Chris was frozen with admiration, watching Eurys's skill and the fact that he even knew how to enchant his sword. With incredible speed, Eurys rushed at the examiner and simultaneously. And finally, he skillfully cast 4 life-draining spells on Chris and his sword. He instantly cast effects that slowed movement and attack speed, and even reduced Chris's attack power and chance to hit. Chris was stunned by Aerys's incredible power, and his body and sword felt as if he was dragging a mountain. He could not comprehend what had happened in such a moment. With a lightning strike, Aerys hit successfully, but instead of hitting Chris, it tore off his wig, which now lay abandoned on the ground. The spectators were completely baffled by that act, and Aerys thought it was an unexpected turn of events and completely beyond his power. When Aerys found himself right behind Chris, he sincerely apologized for the unexpected prank, and Chris, noticeably trembling both in voice and body, quickly calmed him down. Don't worry, although Aerys felt a shadow of guilt for putting Chris in an awkward position. He had no intention of holding back in this decisive duel. He activated magic that enhanced his steps. He swiftly drew a perfect magic circle and carefully directed its energy into his feet. He rushed with such stunning speed that he seemed to simply vanish from everyone's sight, and Chris could not comprehend our sudden disappearance. Aerys quietly appeared right behind his back and firmly pressed the cold blade of his sword against Chris' knee, thereby ending the duel and securing victory for Aerys. Chris accepted defeat with dignity, and the other candidates froze in admiration. They witnessed such overwhelming power that even the examiner gave up. They could not understand who this new candidate was, who so easily defeated the rank C examiner. Chris and Aerys exchanged introductions. Then Chris asked if he was really a magician from the hero team, and Aerys instantly denied it. Someone could not shake the doubt. Did Chris really believe that a member of the hero team would take such exams? It was at that moment, intently staring at Chris's shiny bald head. Aerys apologized, but Chris quickly waved it off and said he understood it was not intentional. At that very moment, Aerys offered to help him instantly grow hair, and it so stunned Chris that he doubted, is such a thing really possible? Without hesitating for a moment, Aerys placed his hand on Chris's head, and at that very moment, his bald spot miraculously transformed into a luxurious, thick dark mane, and Chris was left completely speechless. Overwhelmed with emotions, Chris thanked her with all his heart, and instantly gave Aerys a pass. He passed the test, and immediately found himself in the final. Soon Aerys reached the northeastern part of the Exiled forest, near the village of Bergen, the place where the final exam was to take place. Ahead was a quest to collect the necessary items. The receptionist had warned him earlier. His task was to gather 20 herbs of life force for the potion. Within the strictly allotted 5 hours, he faced a choice: either completely avoid fights or engage in them while effectively collecting the required herbs. Life force herbs were the main ingredient of the potion that restored both health and mana in the higher rank hunting grounds. They naturally abounded due to the concentrated surrounding magical energy. Aerys thought that gathering 20 herbs in 5 hours was quite a difficult task for an E-rank adventurer, but the woman at the reception advised him to try hard because a reward awaited for success. Aerys was very happy about this prospect. She always valued any earnings. The Exiled forest itself was of quite a high rank, well suited for adventurers, and the local monsters were usually manageable by a single brave person. Walking deeper into the forest, he soon found himself right in front of a cluster of about 10 herds and said with a smile that gathering 20 was a trivial matter. Suddenly, out of nowhere appeared a green, fierce rat-like creature rushed at him at full speed. Aerys instantly realized that despite the weak defense, the creature's attack was extremely wild due to incredibly sharp and poisonous fangs. Suddenly, Aerys sharply kicked the rat, and it tumbled across the ground. The smarter the monsters, the craftier they are, so those who noticed Aerys wisely retreated. This would definitely make Rasa's task easier. After some time, he finally gathered all the necessary herbs, and with relief in his chest, set off back to the guild. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, a piercing scream of a girl sounded, a desperate plea for help, as Aerys moved on to deal with the commotion. He came across a young girl who was being ambushed by a threatening horde of blue wolves. There were no noticeable landmarks in their territory, so lone adventurers often found it difficult to conduct reconnaissance. Suddenly, a wolf lunged at Celia and bit her wrist with sharp fangs. Celia's defense crumbled, and that flimsy equipment proved useless. She desperately tried to grab the healing potion, but it accidentally slipped from her hands and rolled on the ground. Those fierce beasts bared their sharp fangs and prepared to attack. And then he instantly lunged at her. She flew back and slammed against a tree. Celia stretched with all her might toward the thrown healing potion, but it always remained just out of her reach. At that very moment, a wolf ominously loomed over her, ready to pounce, but Aerys could no longer bear the horror, and watch it happen. Stealing experience was taboo among adventurers. At first, Aerys decided not to interfere in their fight, but seeing Celia's helplessness, he could no longer stand aside. He effortlessly cast a powerful buff specially created for women, sharply raising her defense and magic resistance, enhancing her healing, and making her movements much faster. Then he cleverly cast a weakening spell on the aggressive creatures. Their movements slowed, attacks became weaker, and accuracy worsened. Finally, he empowered himself, and at that very moment the wolves lunged at her. Celia instinctively closed her eyes, overwhelmed by horror, but when she cautiously opened them again, suddenly she froze in shock. Beside her stood an unknown figure decisively helping her fight off the monstrous wolves, and Aerys calmly advised her to stay close to him because danger still loomed around. He realized the true essence of buff magic is to grant properties, and most such effects can be replicated. In other words, buff magic can really be used offensively. Aerys boldly summoned a formidable magical circle, Prominence, and instantly destroyed the entire pack of wolves, leaving Celia utterly speechless. Several wolves that remained unharmed after his first attack instantly fled the scene. Aerys gently grabbed her shoulder and pulled her close, saying that she was standing too close to the smoldering campfire, and warned that this could have serious consequences if she came under his influence. But being so close to another girl distracted Aerys greatly. His cheeks blushed, yet he still managed to stay calm. He knew that in such trouble he could not afford to be distracted. Shortly after they safely escaped the danger, she felt awkward next to him and generously thanked him for the timely help, but Eurus simply replied that it did not matter much to him. Celia said that was an understatement and asked if he was a high-ranking adventurer. To her surprise, he answered that he was not yet officially an adventurer and would become one only after delivering those herbs back to the guild. Moreover, he asked why Celia herself ended up in such a dangerous place and added that insufficient strength could cost the lives of those who travel alone. But her initial uncertainty instantly melted away, replaced by unbreakable determination as she confidently declared that she aspired to become a heroine. He asked if she wanted to join the hero squad, and her face lit up with excitement as she answered. Once a hero saved her, and since that day heroes have been her greatest inspiration. She admitted that she constantly defeated high-level monsters to effectively accumulate experience points. But now, after nearly losing her life due to her recklessness, she sincerely reflected on her foolishness. Then Aerys told her that the swordsman's place in the hero team was already taken, and the road ahead for the one who would take this path would be quite thorny. But Celia reassured him, "Don't worry, I am not a swordswoman." But he loudly declared that she uses a sword, although she herself is not a fencer. Celia immediately replied that her path does not fit into any usual job, and she was firmly convinced. In the world, there must appear one of the rarest, truly unique professions. And also, shining with admiration, she confessed, she is the holy sword. Meanwhile, on the other side of the town, in the southeastern corner of the village Berghem, near the grave of a degenerate soldier, former hero team Aerys enthusiastically noticed that their share of experience had significantly increased. They even said that it was an impressively economical way just to expel someone from the guild. Nardo confidently said that those potions would undoubtedly pay off the expenses. Others also said that enhancement magic can easily be replaced by ordinary store-bought potions, and that expelling Aerys seemed to have been the right decision. Then they together rush into battle with a fierce wyvern. Some noticed that that day the monsters seemed unusually resilient. They fight with their last strength, not to fall behind the incredibly strong creature. They thought that his attacks were simply incredibly powerful and extraordinarily enduring. In despair, one of them even took out a potion of strength for them to drink. Meanwhile, Nardo shouted piercingly and strictly ordered them to fight the monster seriously. After a joint struggle and numerous attempts, finally they managed to defeat the wyvern. Nardo smiled and said that they could easily take down even a formidable enemy on their own. Moreover, he insisted that the fact that this particular wyvern was so strong was just a coincidence. Then he ordered them not to lose momentum, but the others only exchanged cautious glances. No one dared to say anything reckless in front of Nardo. Instead, Celia enthusiastically told Aerys about her unique work. She explained with a passionate voice that the sword saint is a one-of-a-kind profession, without any analogs, and if she succeeds, she can become the highest embodiment of a swordsman. She was determined, even she could become a hero if she put in the necessary effort and worked persistently with incredible dedication, accumulating experience points. In turn, Aerys explained that being a hero is not always about glory and rainbows, and that a high price had to be paid for it. In response, Celia said that she knows, being a hero is hard, but she resolutely decided to go on an adventure with Aerys and felt that she had no choice but to become a heroine. Seeing how casually she pronounced his name, Aerys was breathless. He froze in open surprise when his name suddenly appeared in the conversation, as if out of nowhere.
Turned out to be a shield.
She had no choice but to become. Celia carelessly admitted that she had fallen in love with him and wanted to go on an adventure together to get closer. Hearing her sincere confession, Aerys quietly laughed, but immediately assured her that he was not laughing at her dreams at all. He then asked in surprise how she could trust him so easily if they had just met. She replied that he had risked his life to save her. She also told a chilling memory. 3 years ago, the Demon King's army invaded her native village Ruria. A demon grabbed her and immediately decided to deal with her because he considered her inexperienced. When she was already on the brink of death, a squad of heroes came to help and saved her. And even one hero extended a gentle hand to her, offering his help.
Wolf tenses again, preparing to launch an attack.
Inexperienced. When she was already on the brink of death, a squad of heroes came to help and saved her. A gentle hand. These funny events made him look closely, asking how he knew such exact details. But when she looked more closely, all the puzzle pieces quickly fell into place, and she noticed a strange resemblance to the boy who was here 3 years ago. Suddenly something clicked for her. Aerys turned out to be the same legendary hero from those times. Aerys now finally understood that he was recognized as a fool and wondered how a member of the hero's party takes the adventurer's exam. Aerys calmly told her that he was suddenly kicked out of the hero's team, and now he was just a beginner adventurer, and Celia was wildly delighted because of this. Suddenly she ran into her savior. She was so stunned that she couldn't hold back. She threw herself into the arms of Aerys, the very person she had dreamed of meeting for so long. Then he asked if she really wanted to form a team with him. Celia answered without a shadow of doubt that it suited her perfectly, and Horace, seeing her determination, thought that it seemed she really was going to stay. After some time, they reached the guild house, and the receptionist was simply stunned their early rival was already here. When she asked about the herbs that give life force, Horace instantly summoned his inventory portal. With a wave of his hand, he laid out all the collected herbs and placed them next to the creatures he had just defeated, right in front of her, subtly hinting that she should buy some materials while she was here. Seeing the inventory portal, the person at the reception was stunned and immediately asked what this secret was. However, Aerys refused to reveal it. He said it was a company secret. In reality, it was his item slot skill, which allowed him to open a gate to another dimension using enhancement magic. It was a side effect he accidentally gained when, using speed magic, he interfered with spacetime. But no one else could open it, so it turned out to be almost useless for the hero team. The receptionist kindly asked him to wait a minute while she processed the purchase. She also congratulated him. He had successfully passed the adventurer exam. She handed him a guild card and advised him to take good care of it. After all, a reissue would cost a full 10,000 jewels. And then Celia intervened, saying that she wanted to create a new team. In a moment, Aerys and Celia left the old house, and finally their team was assembled. Celia suggested stopping by a diner nearby before returning. But Aerys admitted that he had nowhere to spend the night that night, and so it was immediately necessary to find a place. Celia, quite casually, suggested he stay at the same inn where she was already staying. Aerys nervously explained if she were a man, there would be no problems, but he was worried about what might happen if they decided to share a room. But the explanation, it seemed, did not get through to her thick head, and she, with big naive eyes, asked if he wanted to live with her in the same room. He could not resist her simple innocence and decided to go to the diner for now. Soon they reached the diner, and they were served several very tasty dishes. Seeing the huge portions, Aerys asked if she could even eat that much. She reassured him, "Don't worry, I eat quite a lot." He then, somewhat distrustfully, asked if she was really serious about letting him stay in her room. She unquestionably agreed, and with a joyful smile, said that she could eat so much and still compete on the wrist with her beloved person. But later she realized that the portion was indeed a bit too large for her appetite, but Aerys offered to eat her leftovers. She said that she really did not need to force herself. Aerys began to eat with the same spoon as she did. Her face instantly changed. She wondered if it was an indirect kiss. Seeing her embarrassed expression, he asked if she was okay, and she desperately tried to assure that everything was fine. Soon they found themselves in her room, and Aerys said that she had it quite nice here. In response came a silly remark that she carefully chose this very tavern, having tried several others. Seeing how spacious the room was, he smiled and said that there was enough space here for him to rest comfortably. But as soon as he began to spread the sheet on the floor, she asked what he was doing. Then she noted that he should rest in a real bed, otherwise he might get sick. Embarrassed by her direct remark, Aerys awkwardly tried to explain what the problem was when a boy and a girl share one folding bed. But her innocent puppy eyes appeared again, and she quietly asked if he really did not like the idea of resting with her. Aerys again could not resist her request, and finally gave in to her desire. Settling on the same bed as she was, he felt terribly awkward, especially when she lay so close to him. It was then that Celia quietly laughed, and whispered that his trembling breath tickled her neck, and he immediately looked away. Through the narrow bunk, her body was still pressed against his, and Aerys Faye blushed completely. The next morning, they noticed that Rizik was energetically doing push-ups. The refined skills of a magician do not come overnight. They required both endurance and broad knowledge, and hints from ancient spell books and old myths proved indispensable. Just then Celia woke up, cheerfully said good morning, and asked why he woke up so early. Aerys replied that he was just doing his daily training and had just completed 1,000 push-ups, crunches, and squats. She was impressed to hear about his strict daily routine and inquired whether he really followed it every day. He asked indifferently if it was not a usual routine for everyone, but she immediately objected. This made him think that those heroes from his former party probably mocked the real effectiveness. With a worried expression, she noted that although training is indeed important, he should not push himself to such extremes. Aerys frankly admitted that he wants to defeat the Demon King and then live peacefully, assuring that he would spare no effort for this. He added that if they manage to defeat the Demon King, this ubiquitous magical energy will disappear, and they will no longer have to fight. In this world, substances in the atmosphere mostly did not harm people, but could suddenly awaken the most diverse monsters. The Demon King reinforced that magical energy with powerful barriers, and these creatures simply went insane. Paradoxically, Aerys had to become stronger precisely to avoid fighting. Celia noticed that everyone truly dreams of a quiet life, but then asked if his ambition was not too great for him. Aerys could not disagree with her, but fully understanding this from such an explanation was difficult. Then he shared an old story that happened 6 years ago, where in their real village, a gorilla dungeon suddenly appeared. Unlike usual dungeons, it had one terrible feature. If it was not cleared by sunset, monsters would relentlessly pour out from its depths. Then Aerys's parents, both respected adventurers of rank A, placed the evacuation of the villagers on his shoulders. Aerys insisted on fighting alongside them, but they did not want to drag him into such a battle. He was not even an adventurer yet. His parents were extremely strong, but that day a troubling premonition awoke in him. Surprisingly, on that very day he turned 13 years old, and his parents promised to celebrate it with him. However, the dungeon remained untouched when the sun set, and due to the relentless flow of monsters, even more adventurers tragically died. Even as a very small Aerys understood what had happened to his parents, and vowed to grow strong to avenge them both. Celia remembered that incident with the gorilla basement in the city and sighed with relief. He was lucky to survive the attack. Aerys loudly warned, if the Demon King is not defeated, such real incidents will become even more frequent. And he was determined not to allow such a disaster at any cost. He apologized once again for spoiling the mood, but Celia firmly said that this was an extremely important topic for discussion. But Aerys was confident there was no point in getting stuck in the past, and advised them to have a little snack before heading to the guild. Celia smiled gently and added that it was worth taking a quest immediately once they arrived. Soon they reached the guild, and Yuraskan insisted passionately that without coordinated teamwork, they had no chance to defeat the Demon King, so raising the entire party's strength was extremely important. First and foremost in his thoughts was to strengthen Celia, so with this unwavering goal, he decided to go on a mission to a certain area. When Celia asked if he had found any suitable quest, Aerys nodded confidently and handed her the quest letter. It was a request to destroy the monster birds. She quietly admitted that she was not sure how much help she could provide in this adventure. But he told her directly, this quest was created just for her today. Although for Celia it would be a certain challenge, the experience points gained would be impressive. But she hesitated and did not want to take on the task, saying that her attacks would not reach the birds. He asked if she really could not defeat flying enemies with a sword, and she quietly explained that it was impossible from any angle. Seeing her determined reaction, a risk appeared. She tended to get too stuck in her principles, and because of this could not truly reveal the talent of the Sword Saint, so it was vital for her to break through this barrier. Without hesitation, he immediately offered to teach her a simple trick that would help handle this task. As the day passed, they soon found themselves on Southern Road 227, near the village of Belva, and Aerys offered to show the technique. And when a terrible bird lunged at him, he calmly told her to infuse magic into the sword, clench it, and during the swing imagine that she was becoming stronger.
Creature begins to crush his skull with its fingers.
Technique. And when shortly after he released a blazing laser of magical waves into the sky and instantly scorched the surrounding area, he stopped at a certain spot and confidently said what he believed in. As if she could have pulled off this trick the same way, but she stubbornly shook her head, refusing. I wonder how such a thing could have happened at all. He returned the sword to her, but it was quite difficult for her to grasp it on the first try. Then he began to explain that the key was in relaxed shoulders and allowing the magic to flow smoothly when swinging the sword. Remembering the advice, Celia obeyed and swung the sword, but her movements were awkward and clumsy, and then Aerys came closer, firmly grabbed both her hands, and suggested swinging together a bit. This act so confused Celia that she blushed and froze in place. He, suspecting nothing, asked if everything was all right, but she quickly waved it off and tried to focus on training. Then with a short command, he ordered her to breathe in unison and strengthen her magic with an even rhythm. She was forced to, and suddenly a fierce beam of magic burst from her sword, instantly striking down and knocking over that terrible bird. Aerys encouraged her, keep that rhythm and now try on your own. She obeyed, and boldly began to do it alone. Her strikes constantly missed the target, but he encouraged her not to give up and to do her best. Even when her strikes slightly missed the mark, Celia did not give up training and soon effortlessly performed the technique he taught her, and her accuracy rapidly increased. After a few moments, only one monster remained. Defeating it, they would successfully complete the quest. Meanwhile, Aerys kept enthusiastically repeating how incredible she was, a true sword saint. It still warned her not to lower her guard until the very end. Aerys stood ready, prepared to back up if something went wrong, but it seemed they would complete the quest without problems. Just then his attention was instantly captured when Celia told him about the magical birds, which were now completely fleeing the scene. Their escape seemed strange for creatures that only get scared by some bristles. Little magical birds rarely broke formation unless something really serious happened. At that moment, a huge tremor appeared before their eyes. It caught Celia by surprise. She anxiously asked what she should do in such a situation. However, Aerys did not even show a shadow of fear or surprise. He calmly said that this last target simply appeared on its own. He thought that Celia effortlessly dealt with all the magical birds with a single strike, and with her current strength, he believed she could easily bring down that wyvern. He was overwhelmed by terrible anxiety. She asked distrustfully if he was really asking her to handle that monster alone, and he calmly explained that hitting such a large target would be easier for her than hitting those little birds. At that moment, Celia realized it really was an easier target, but her determination suddenly wavered when she saw the fierce beast with sharp fangs. Seeing her lose composure, Aerys tried to calm her down. She firmly stated that she was more than ready to defeat that creature with her skills, especially after mastering new techniques and gaining experience in battles. Then she clearly calmed down and immediately pulled herself together. She decided to give it one last try. When she struck again, a magical beam burst out and hit the wyvern again, piercing its thick scales. Celia could hardly believe her eyes that she had defeated the monster herself. Without hesitation, she immediately threw herself into Aerys's arms and sincerely thanked him for teaching her, but he modestly said that he seemed to have done nothing, only showed her the technique, and advised Celia to believe in her own strength a little more. He suggested returning to the village, and she, smiling, gently called him modest. He did not want to admit how valuable his help was. Soon they returned to the guild and reported at the reception that the task was completed, who seemed very impressed by the ample space and the ability to control time. But he admitted during that quest he did not fight at all. Instead, it was Celia alone who defeated the magical birds with her sword. He said that all he did was simply stand behind and watch her performance, and all the credit was hers alone. But the receptionist found it hard to believe that Celia could have defeated those countless magical birds with just a sword. It seemed physically impossible. Yet Celia stepped forward and frankly said that she had learned an incredible spell from Aerys. She even showered him with praise, saying that he was incredibly skilled at teaching. His power could easily make the impossible possible, and Aerys thought to himself that he only wanted to support Celia from the sidelines, but did not expect her to praise him so openly in front of the receptionist. He blushed from embarrassment at her enthusiastic compliments, then smoothly interrupted the conversation, deliberately steering the topic away from himself, and instead reported that they had completed the task. Immediately she rushed to check the delivered materials. She felt that something was missing, but he calmly reassured her and instantly produced another missing item. It was none other than a huge wyvern, which Celia had previously defeated, and the receptionist froze in shock upon seeing such a formidable beast right in front of her, and began to doubt whether it was really the wyvern that Celia had defeated. But the wyvern really looked puzzled and asked if its appearance had really shocked her so much. Without hesitation, she said that it truly shocked her. Because that wyvern was one of the most powerful magical creatures, even B-rank adventurers could barely defeat it. Aerys was genuinely surprised. He didn't even suspect he had such formidable power. It seemed the hero squad dealt with such creatures without any difficulties, so the receptionist decided that they themselves were quite powerful. And it was at that moment Horace inquired whether they would give a good price for the wyvern material. The receptionist nodded and said it would significantly increase their income. Then she quickly assessed the wyvern end. For now, she quickly recorded the quest completion and then took out their guild cards. Their points for completing the quest were updated, now 30 out of 100, and for the quest itself, they were also given 1 guild point. She also told him that he would rise to the next rank as soon as those points reached 10. By diligently completing quests and accumulating these points, people eventually raised their adventure rank. Then Celia asked if they could simply level up by completing simpler quests, and the receptionist replied that it was not a problem at all. But she noted, to move forward, they need to complete at least 1 quest from each rank. so that unworthy adventurers would not reach higher ranks. But the registrar immediately added that they clearly did not belong in the E rank. Their abilities and strength were too impressive. Strength, and just at that moment, their evaluation was completed, and she was simply stunned to see such a large amount on the list. She revealed that the reward for their quest was 50,000 gems, and the ransom for the wyvern itself would cost another 50,000 jewels. As soon as they left the guild house, Celia was clearly anxious. She simply did not know what to do with such a large sum. She had never received so much money at once before, and she was haunted by the fear that it might be stolen. Aerys calmly assured her that in that case they would just go hunting again, but Celia, with a worried expression, said that it was Aerys's hard-earned money. When he heard this, Orst suggested splitting the 50,000 fee between themselves and giving the reward from the wyvern entirely to Celia. He recalled how his former team of heroes constantly argued over dividing the loot. But this time Aerys wanted to act completely fairly after all. Celia herself had felled the wyvern, but she insisted that she was not alone, and that without him they would not have managed, so they insisted that he receive the full amount. Hearing this, Aerys could not hold back and called for kindness, and gently suggested that she allow him to keep the money for now. Putting the pouch into his item slot, he said he would spend the money to buy suitable weapons for Celia. She drew her current sword from its sheath and said that it was quite a good weapon. But Aerys guessed that it was probably a decent sword from the market. Then he said that although it was a good sword, they say that simply awakening the true power of the sword is not enough, and it will soon realize this is lacking in many things. He advised thinking ahead and buying a better sword in advance, and Celia was impressed that he thought so far ahead. He then firmly stated that for those 100,000 precious stones they received, they could even custom make a sword. Hearing this, Celia's face lit up with delight, and she asked if it was a gift from him, but he only replied that it was a reward for her efforts. At the parallel moment, the former team of heroes of Aerys barely kept pace when they finally realized that kicking Aerys out of the group was a big mistake. Even if one of them could at least slightly back up with potions and healing skills, this was by no means enough to heal the damage they were currently suffering. Other team members suspected that Aerys was not only weakening the monsters, but also simultaneously strengthening them. And another said that he had never heard of such a possibility. They recalled how back then they expelled Aerys without any hesitation. Nardo silenced him, and they realized that Aerys had really tried to convey something very important even before the exile. Finally, it dawned on them. Aerys had been quietly supporting them behind the scenes all along. And in the end, distraction appears, he believes. Nardo silenced him, and very important even before. Suddenly, Nardo lunged, grabbing her shirt with all his might and angrily accusing her of hypocrisy, declaring that she too had been secretly plotting, and now treated him as if he were a villain. He shouted that they had all together decided to exile Aerys from the party, so they were all equally guilty. Trembling, she apologized to him, and Nardo suggested not to dwell on the past but to move forward. Most importantly, he asked about the supplies of healing potion, and she replied that she had already spent the money for this month. Without hesitation, he simply ordered her to go to the store and buy more. She said with a bitter smile that repairing their equipment after yesterday's brutal battle would cost 800,000 jewels, and warned that if this continued, next month their pockets would be hit hard by the rent payment. Nardo was silent for a moment, then said that Aerys was a comrade who traveled with them, and that he would not reject him if he wanted to return to the squad. It was clear that Nardo did not want to humiliate himself before his comrades after he himself had exiled Aerys. He was afraid that if he was not careful, the balance of power in the group would be completely overturned. He suddenly decided, and the rest, as if with one motion, immediately agreed, almost without any complaints. Nardo assured them that as soon as he encountered Aerys again, he would personally ask him to return. Meanwhile, the girl confidently said that after such an exile, Aerys would never return, but the other members made her fall silent. He said it was a big step forward. Nardo even changed his mind. He even blurted out that Aerys didn't even have the qualification of an adventurer, and without it, he could no longer take orders. They were convinced that he had no choice but to return, saying he could neither earn money nor find new comrades, but they did not even suspect the most important thing. Aerys had already formed a new team with his extremely reliable partner Celia. Meanwhile, in the arm restore shop, the sellers coldly refused Aerys, saying they only took on what was already on the shelves, and custom orders were too troublesome. Celia thought that thanks to the one she had defeated, she got a whole 50,000 gems, and she couldn't even order a sword on request. Aerys suggested trying to persuade the weapons merchants in the capital. At that moment, his attention suddenly turned to. People around whispered, The dwarf recently refused a job offer that cost a pile of gold and jewels, and they were stunned, not knowing how to convince him. In this world, dwarves were famous for incredible craftsmanship, and Eurus himself, when he was in the hero team, had heard legends about that master from the dwarf clan. Without hesitation, Aerys approached those people and asked to tell more. The man noticed that Aerys seemed somewhat familiar to him and asked if he too was interested in that skillful dwarf. In response, Aerys confirmed, and Celia enthusiastically said that she wanted a powerful sword made to order. The man admitted that they had also gone there hoping to find good weapons, but that old dwarf turned out to be too stubborn and simply refused their request. Moreover, they added, the dwarf would create only for those he himself considered worthy. And the admission criterion was simple: only mastery of swordsmanship. Then, Aerys pulled out a map and asked, "Could you tell me where he is?" And the man, without hesitation, pointed to a certain direction on the map. And she saw that the workshop was very close. Celia decided to go there the same day. Just then her stomach suddenly growled loudly, and she blushed, trying somehow to justify that awkward sound. But Aerys decisively decided that instead they would go to the workshop the next day. Instead, he asked her not to overexert herself when she was so hungry. Out of nowhere, a young girl named Sherrod accidentally bumped into a burly man and, without hesitation, scraped her knee. Horace instantly ran to her side and in a moment healed her wound. Cheryl was completely amazed. Her wounded knee miraculously healed, she sincerely thanked and quickly left. Celia tried to compliment his kindness, but her stomach betrayed her again. A loud rumble spread around and left her utterly humiliated. Aerys's quiet giggle only intensified her irritation, and she began scolding him for not being polite. The next morning they reached the infamous workshop of the dwarf Gale, and when they knocked on the sturdy gates, suddenly a short old man appeared and demanded to know what they were doing there. Aerys apologized for appearing without warning and introduced himself. While speaking, he was looking for a master craftsman. Gale shook his head distrustfully and remarked that Aerys was just another adventurer chasing after weapons. Aerys then told him that they wanted to order a sword for Celia, and Gale without hesitation asked if she really deserved his custom-made sword. Before asking to see her current weapon, carefully examining her sword, he noted that her potential was truly impressive, but she lacked fine craftsmanship. He firmly believed that if he entrusted his sword to some inexperienced person, she would simply abuse its natural power. The frivolous expression on her face faded and became sad as she accepted it. She unleashed all her anger on the monsters. He firmly believed that if he entrusted his sword to some Unexpectedly, Gale noticed that after the refusal, they didn't even try to bribe anyone to get through, and Eurus replied that Gale looked like a person who couldn't be bought with gold. He didn't have gold, and in general, there was too little money to buy himself a way inside. Gale liked this honesty, but his first conclusion didn't change, and surprisingly, Sherrod suddenly appeared, asking if her grandfather was sending adventurers away empty-handed again. It was then that she met Aerys and Celia, and sincerely thanked them once again for their invaluable help yesterday. Embarrassed, Gale asked if she knew them, and Sherrod confirmed, revealing everything that had happened the day before, a little later. Aerys couldn't believe that the child they had saved would turn out to be his granddaughter, and it even seemed as if they had managed to break the ice in Gale's heart. It seemed he softened a little when he heard about what happened yesterday. Gale later said that they were not at all the bad people he had initially thought them to be, and that he would now immediately hand them his sword. Celia was clearly delighted by this news. Sherrod simply said that her grandfather did not want anyone to abuse his precious swords. Gale also said, if the adventurers are weak, the villain will easily take the sword from them. And then he put forward 3 vital conditions before them. Firstly, Aerys would train persistently until he mastered Celia's swordsmanship. Secondly, a sword crafted by Gale himself would be in his hand. Hearing that, Gale, besides Celia's, would forge a custom sword for him. Aerys did not stop and continued to interrogate him. But Gale immediately exclaimed that in his opinion Aerys was the most skilled swordsman, while Celia had the greatest potential. Hearing this, Aerys tried to explain that he was not a swordsman, just a spellcaster, but Gale remained unshaken. Titles meant nothing to him. He added that if they were pure and strong swordsmen, that was more than enough for him, because it was his greatest dream as a craftsman. Aerys then inquisitively asked if his last condition was about gold. But Gale waved it off, saying he already had more than enough wealth. Then he named the last condition, to bring back more than 1 kilogram of spirit stone. Soon Aerys and Celia found themselves wrapped in the embrace of the dense bergam forest in the land called the Forest of Spirits. Aerys could not hold back and said that Gale really set the strictest conditions for their final task. In that forest, the energy of spirits was imperceptibly accumulating in various magical creatures. And at the very top of the food chain gathered the most predators. Celia cautiously struck the monsters with her sword so that Aerys could examine the stones they left behind. He bitterly noted that even the big ones gave only about 30 of what was desired, and Celia couldn't help but say that encountering the strongest monsters was purely a matter of luck. Aerys said they would have to be patient during the search, and Celia slyly asked if the monsters couldn't just come to them themselves. As soon as he heard this, an idea instantly sparked in his head, and he announced that they would lure the strongest monster with bait. And when she finally asked about it, Aerys directly stated that he would be the bait, and Celia simply froze in shock. It was not entirely senseless. Aerys decided to make himself the bait, carefully regulating his magical flow so they could lure the large predatory animals, allowing those creatures to feel the fluctuations of magical power. Aerys was convinced, if you slightly restrain a powerful surge of magic and then break it off with a single jerk, the biggest beast in the forest would definitely come out. Aerys instantly implemented his plan, and as he predicted, the most terrifying monster appeared from the forest. Heavy steps thundered, the ground shook threateningly, Celia clearly shivered from its sudden appearance, and Aerys swiftly covered her mouth so she wouldn't make a sound right then. Again, a gigantic terrible monster stood in full majesty, and Celia was overwhelmed with sheer horror. Meanwhile, Aerys calmly noted that, considering the enormous size of the beast, they could obtain a truly gigantic spirit stone. That predatory beast ruled over the entire forest known as Behemoth. A fierce enemy, even the former party of Russ could not defeat it in its heroic days. Aerys instantly devised a plan and ordered Celia to dodge to the right immediately after the attack while he distracted the creature. He instantly drew a magic circle right behind his back, successfully attracting the monster's attention, and the enraged beast immediately lunged at him. At the opposite corner of the field, Celia skillfully released a beam of magic and hit that crude creature right on target. In a commanding tone, Aerys quickly ordered her to dodge, and simultaneously created a wind arrow with his powerful magic. Despite Behemoth's inherent affinity for the earth element, Celia and Aerys skillfully combined their magical powers and unleashed them on Behemoth with full destructive force. When the terrifying monster lay defeated before them, distrust sparkled in Celia's eyes. She could hardly believe that they had managed Behemoth on their own. She enthusiastically praised Aerys's incredible power, but he modestly said he could not have done it alone. She said she was just following his orders, and Aerys decided not to dwell on it and let the matter go. Moreover, he claimed that a monster of such caliber should yield a huge spirit stone, and they went to examine the corpse of the fallen beast, to their great surprise. In the stomach, they found a tiny, young girl with delicate wings. She curled up so that she could fit into both palms. Her very presence was a funny question. Aerys confessed, judging by her special magical power, she might be the one who tames spirits right there, and at that very moment. The girl came to and said that she had rested so well. When her gaze fell on two noticeably different strangers, she calmly asked who they were. Despite the appearance of a tiny girl, Aerys instinctively felt her incredible power, tens of times stronger even than giants. For now, he decided to behave cautiously around her and do everything not to scare her. Without hesitation, Celia introduced herself to her as one of the rest of the group and even introduced him on his behalf, despite his nervousness. The young girl enthusiastically introduced herself as Sylph, the scandalously famous forest spirit. Seeing this, Aerys sighed with relief. It turned out that only he was worried. He could not help but be a little embarrassed by his paranoia, and Celia, on the other hand, noted that he was strangely shy. And he himself said, "People are seen so rarely deep in the mountains." When they were further questioned about their affairs, Aerys frankly admitted that they had come to look for spirit stones. Feeling this, he froze for a moment before focusing all his strength to create a sturdy stone chair. Aerys froze in amazement, seeing the supreme spirit stone right before him, and immediately declared that he wanted to possess this extraordinary thing. Sylph, without hesitation, instantly gave him the spirit stone, and generously offered to prepare even double portions for them, and Aerys could not help but admire this. He pondered its colossal weight after all. Even 1 kilogram of spirit stone was considered extremely rare. Although for him it was a dream come true, he sadly noted that its enormous scale far exceeded what they could pay for. Without hesitation, Sylph innocently said that she could make as many batches of those stones as she wished. Then Celia explained to her that the spirit stones formed from excess magical energy, and even the largest beasts usually only gave stones the size of a palm. Because there was nothing on the market even slightly larger than what stood before them, it was truly considered priceless. Aerys also gently told her that he could not just take such a priceless item without offering anything in return. She simply said that she wanted to travel, Somewhat uncertainly, he asked if that was really all she wanted, and she nodded. Celia also inquired whether it was really normal for spirits like her to be outside the forest, and reassured them she could easily endure several years outside it. With a gloomy expression, she quietly confessed that she had been marinating all alone in that dim forest for so long. And for her it became a real suffocation. Besides, finally she admitted, only the conversation with them significantly lifted her mood and brightened her soul. Aerys and Celia exchanged a glance, and then Aerys extended his hand, inviting me to join their adventure. When Aerys activated the item slot and inserted the spirit stone into it, Self froze in amazement and asked if they could also enter the spirit world. He was clearly confused by her words, so she decided to demonstrate, quickly transforming half of her form into an item slot. Aerys finally understood that what he had long considered his personal item slot was actually the spirit world. All along he himself stated that it was incredibly spacious, and more importantly, she said with admiration that for a human to have access to the spirit world was truly incredible. And Celia also showered Aerys with praise, calling him amazing, and he couldn't understand why she was so proud of him. She also informed Sylph that she could freely travel from the spirit world and that Aerys had now effectively become a spirit himself. Sylph jokingly called Aerys her dad. This really stunned him. Seeing his completely speechless reaction, she asked if she had said something wrong, but Aerys replied that she had come out of the belly of the behemoth, so technically she was his child. But she completely ignored his remark and continued calling Celia mom, and Celia, not worried at all, playfully indulged in her game. Self asked if she didn't feel uncomfortable when called mom, but Celia naively and sincerely said she was really glad to finally have a family. She looked tenderly and, blushing shyly, said that Eurus had finally become a father too. Hearing this, because of this, Aerys froze, stunned and completely speechless, as if suddenly Celia and he were already a couple. He asked himself if he felt bad, and Celia asked if he really disliked being called dad. Seeing their sweet and innocent faces, Aerys couldn't resist and simply agreed to their reckless and playful decisions. In a few moments, the three reached the village, and Self was amazed to see so many people, and Aerys felt that people were looking at him because Self was standing behind. Seeing how those people were staring at her so intently, she became embarrassed and suddenly hid herself in the spirit world. But suddenly, right in front of him, appeared Aerys's former party of heroes, the same people who had so cruelly expelled him from their group. Seeing them, Aerys asked what they wanted from him, and Nardo asked him not to be so cold to them, reminding that they were former comrades. Aerys couldn't understand why they suddenly appeared out of nowhere after he was expelled from the group, but Nardo explained that since Aerys left, it seemed everyone had a lot on their minds, and he even wondered, doesn't Aerys miss his former comrades? And he also said that if he wished, maybe he would accept him back into the hero squad. Nardo added that Aerys Neen was still listed in the registry of the heroes party, so his return was only a matter of time, and he still had a chance to rejoin the party. Only 3 days had passed without decisive magical help from Aerys, and Nardo and the others had set aside their pride much faster than he had imagined. With a light slice mark, Aerys said that it seemed they all misunderstood something fundamental. He exclaimed whether they really wanted him to return to the party, and added that they seemed completely confused about their own position. This sharp remark left everyone speechless for a moment. Nardo responded aggressively, claiming that it was Aerys who seemed to have misinterpreted their intentions, and other members warned him. As soon as he strayed from the hero's path, his rise to power would end. This was his last chance to reconsider his decisions. But Aerys bluntly told them that he didn't care about being a hero or advancing in ranks, and instantly pulled a defeated giant from his inventory portal right above them, adding that he was completely satisfied with his current position. He admitted that he never intended to return to the heroes squad again, and now the most important thing for him was the true friends he had met along the way. Boiling with rage, Nardo called him Koki and threatened to immediately erase his name from the royal city's registries, warning that Eurus would regret not listening earlier. Aerys calmly and carefully warned him, time would show who would regret more, so don't just do whatever you want. Shortly after their departure, Solf jumped out of the portal and asked about those strangers, and Celia replied that it seemed to be Aerys's former hero squad. Celia asked if it would kill them to ask more politely if they so desperately wanted him back, but Aerys simply replied that their pride would never allow them to do that.
He summons another sword.
It seemed to be Aerys's former hero squad. In a few minutes, they reached Gale's workshop and placed a chair made of spirit stone right in front of him. He was in complete shock. Gale instantly put on his glasses and carefully examined the object, aloud marveling at how Eurus managed to obtain such a priceless material, while Eurus attributed it all to the whims of the spirits. A remark that was not entirely incorrect. Gale said enthusiastically that he had never before seen such an amazing material, and fervently expressed a desire to immediately start working on that extraordinary thing. Then Gale began working, carefully giving the product the desired shape with precise hammer blows. Aerys hesitated, wondering if such an action might harm the magical formation in the spirit stone. Meanwhile, Sherrod soon appeared and suggested sitting down to enjoy tea while Gale immersed himself in his work. Over steaming cups of tea they talked, and Cher proudly told that if an ordinary blacksmith would need days for such a task, her grandfather would manage it alone because he had the strength of 100 men. Celia smiled and remarked that Gale was quite a boastful grandfather. They even asked if such a cunning thing could really be forged so quickly. Aerys replied that modern blacksmiths also possess magic. Magic, that huge wave of energy he had felt earlier, burst out of Gale and confirmed the rumors about his impressive skills. Aerys asked when it would be most convenient to return for the swords, but Sherich's answer that they would be finished by the end of the day made him jump in pure disbelief. He said that everything was happening too fast, while she proudly praised her grandfather his speed and world-class craftsmanship. Just then Gale came and announced that the work was completed. He presented 2 amazing swords before them and proudly declared that these were undoubtedly his greatest masterpieces. As soon as Aerys grabbed the sword, he instantly felt its incredible lightness and agility. Although these swords did not directly use the spirit stone, they were filled with concentrated magic designed to significantly enhance attack power. As for Celia, she was delighted with her first custom-made sword. It was incredibly light and very comfortable in the hand, but Aerys immediately warned her not to swing it carelessly. But all his efforts were in vain. The barely noticeable swing of her sword caused a huge magical explosion that completely destroyed Gale's hut and left everyone stunned. Finding herself before a huge torn hole in the workshop ceiling, Celia noticeably trembled, pondering what to do next. Gale realized that he really should not have trusted his beautiful sword to someone as inexperienced as her. But Aerys reacted instantly, energetically activating his healing magic and effortlessly patching the huge hole in the ceiling. Seeing this, Cher enthusiastically praised him for his incredible skill, and Gale finally sighed with relief. Celia bowed deeply before Gale and sincerely apologized for ruining his precious home, but he kindly reassured her, saying that the house actually looked much cleaner than before. Moreover, Gale extracted a promise from them that Aerys would take decisive responsibility for Celia and master the new sword himself. He sincerely believed that Aerys and Celia were naturally connected. Both diligently agreed before parting ways. Leaving the workshop, Celia apologized once again for her carelessness, and Aerys warned her to be careful with the new sword, emphasizing its extraordinary durability. At that very moment, Self suddenly appeared out of nowhere, arched his back, stretched, and yawned widely, and when he asked if she had rusted, she immediately denied it, and Aerys could not help but think that in some ways she was surprisingly childish. Celia suddenly shuddered and, trembling, noticed that although the days are getting longer, the nights are still cold. Indeed, suddenly an idea flashed in her mind, and with a slight smile she reached out and gently squeezed Aura's palm, as if to say this will warm them for now. His cheeks uncontrollably flushed, and from the other side, with playful self-irony, it was said that they definitely look like a couple. But Cillian indifferently said that his hands are just very warm. She gently intertwined her fingers with his and whispered that she would like to always stay just like this. Aerys's face flushed. He was scared by the fact that she might really not notice the awkward situation she was creating, but on the other hand, he thought he might be exaggerating a bit. At that moment, it was playfully noted that her mom and dad seemed to really get along well with each other. She, with hope in her voice, asked if they were finally going home, and Aerys replied that they were heading to Celia's tavern. I playfully blushed and asked in a mocking tone if they would stay in the same room together, to which Celia indifferently remarked that there is no free space for auras. Self enthusiastically called her amazing and jokingly dubbed her mom, and Aerys thought that one must be extremely careful with Self. At that moment, they noticed a suspicious guy in a worn hoodie, as if he was looking for a certain guest in a black cloak, and was standing at the agreed meeting place. Aerys was walking further when suddenly a guy approached him, and when Aerys, with curiosity in her voice, asked who he was, the boy quietly, with a barely noticeable gesture, beckoned him into the neighboring alley. It was a stupid question whether he really knew that person, said Aerys. The boy did not seem particularly hostile, but at the same time was interested in the circumstances. Suddenly something clicked in his head, and it occurred to him, could that suspicious boy not know that he was actually a former hero? Without hesitation, Aerys decided to follow the boy into the narrow alley. The boy later sincerely apologized for disturbing them. When asked who he was, he admitted that he was buying guild cards. Moreover, he believed that Aerys had spare guild cards, and hearing this, patiently waited for their arrival. Aerys firmly noted that a personal guild card could not be superfluous, and trading such cards was strictly prohibited. He instantly realized that the boy had mistaken Aerys for someone else, and as soon as he realized the mistake, he frantically ran away, as if advising them to just pretend that they had never met. But Aerys firmly grabbed him by the hood, and with a stern expression on his face, he said, decisively stated that the boy seemed fully aware of his faults and would have to answer for them for the sake of peace. Suddenly, his whole body is pierced by pain, by the hood, and with a stern expression on his face, he said. Soon Aerys and Celia came to the guild house and immediately pulled out a stack of guild cards, placing it right in front of the person at the counter. This left her completely stunned when she asked what had happened, and he told about every detail of those events. She said that the loss and theft of guild cards is an old and painful problem, but before she could say anything else, a piercing scream from a stranger cut through the air. She demanded to know if they also had her guild card. The crowd quickly gathered and began demanding their guild cards. The receptionist desperately asked them to calm down and take their cards one by one. Seeing this chaos, Aerys realized that this was truly a serious problem and apologized for burdening her like this right before closing. He inquired what would happen to the boy involved in this illegal matter, and she replied that he would be handed over to security and then his parents would be notified. At that moment, the boy confessed that he had no parents, no brothers or sisters, and no one to come for him. Then it became clear he was an orphan. Aerys said that he perfectly understood his feelings after all. He himself knew what the pain of losing parents at such a young age was like. However, he also said that this did not justify his actions, and he would have to take full responsibility for his actions. Aerys then asked what would happen to the orphans, and the receptionist explained that they would probably be taken in by some educational institution in the royal capital. As soon as he heard this, Aerys felt relief. He sincerely believed that young orphans like them still needed to be given a decisive chance to reform. When they started to leave, the boy thanked him and with a sad expression said that he struggled very hard to make ends meet, living like that the income was barely enough to survive. Aerys silently observed his unkempt appearance, concluding that he was just an ordinary thug because the profits mostly lined the pockets of his boss. He insisted strongly that the boy really leave the underworld, especially since Aerys went to great lengths to save him from an even worse fate. But then Lillian calmed her, don't think like that, because the profits mostly lined. He insisted strongly that it was clear from her face, the found stack probably did not contain her lost guild card.
Seeing the boy trembling.
Don't think like that. He insisted strongly that Noticing her strange reaction, he asked if something was wrong, but she insisted that she was not angry. Her face stubbornly remained frowning. Soon they were shown standing in front of the quest board. Celia was turning over in her mind which task to take to properly test her new sword, but she was still only allowed on E-rank quests. Meanwhile, Aerys pondered. He had spent a fortune on his sword, so he wanted to complete a few quests to pay for lodging. Celia became worried and suggested simply giving up and sticking to the usual requests, but he waved it off and immediately handed her a quest form, where the task was hunting an E-rank golem. Golems were creatures with incredible destructive power and armor as hard as stone, but they moved quite slowly. Aerys assured her, even E-rank adventurers could deal with this enemy if a dozen people gathered, so it would be a good target for Celia as well. Anxiety and seriousness froze on her face when she asked if they were really going to go against enemies that required a dozen people. But he calmly assured her, now she was not alone like in her lonely days, and under his protection no scratch threatened her. He even praised her for being able to manage on her own.
Excitedly realizes that his strategy worked.
But he calmly assured her. When Silt stepped into the luxurious green forest, her face lit up with admiration, and she froze, admiring the landscape. Having found a bright landscape endless and incredibly refreshing, Aerys thought about how she had really spent so much time locked in that dim, lonely forest, and he swore he would finally allow himself to fully enjoy the outside world. He reminded Celia of their task and instantly devised a cunning plan. First, distract the golems with his magic, and she would quickly attack from behind. While they carefully executed their plan, he himself placed a bait right in front of the huge, terrifying ghoul. Aerys waved to Celia. She rushed at the golem, and with one devastating blow split the monster in half, and herself, not believing her eyes, asked if this was really the end.
Thing is, his opponent's tentacles are hard to track.
Aerys waved to Celia. She rushed at the golem. Celia thought that the gaons in that area might be weaker than they imagined, but Aerys disagreed, instantly sheathed his sword. He noted that they were little different from ordinary golems, but when he tried to slash another one, he suddenly realized that their newly acquired weapons were indeed too strong. It seemed his own growth outpaced what he could now comprehend, so he decided to tackle everything at once. He claimed that facing them one by one simply made no sense. Stupid question, could the golems really have attacked everyone at once, and Aerys, instead of explanations, just showed what he was capable of. He swiftly created a magic circle, spread his magic thinly over a wide area, and just as quickly captured the positions of all the enemies surrounding him. Then he successfully targeted the remaining 8 golems, and, using enchantment magic, filled them with a terrifying aura. When those monstrous golems aggressively advanced closer, Aerys calmly said that now her power allowed her to handle such a number, and Celia was in complete shock. Her trick worked flawlessly. In an incredibly short time, she smoothly and precisely swung her sword, and instantly, without any effort, laid down all the gals. Aerys was frozen with amazement. He praised her, not hiding his admiration. She had refined the technique he taught her during the hunt for that monstrous bird in just 2 days, and for the first time took a sword in her hands. He told her that this was only the basics, and ahead there was still so much to learn, and these words truly surprised Celia. When he collected the remains of the fallen Gaons into the item slot, he said she absorbed power much better than he expected. When they began to retreat, Aerys called Sylph, ordered her to return, and added that she really gathered quite a few scraps, but when he looked closer, he came across the guild card of a woman named Yukina Rembrandt. It indicated her profession, sage, a prudent woman who was desperately searching for her guild card. Aerys enthusiastically told Celia about the sages, explaining that it was one of those rare professions that stood alongside the holy swords. They asked foolishly and indifferently whether he also possessed a sword like hers, but he denied it. He added that Sage is a true master of magic, especially in offensive spells, and his talent was simply off the charts. With an admiring expression on her face, she asked what the chances were that the 2 unique workers could work together. And he explained that both of their workers are rare talents without whom the country cannot manage. Then he suggested immediately rushing back to the guild and delivering this important news, gently stroked Sylph on the head, and praised her for her invaluable help. In the guild house, Yukina was still desperately searching for the lost guild card, wondering if she would ever be able to get it back. She also inquired about the fee for reissuing, and the receptionist said it was as much as 10,000 jewels. When the stress began to noticeably tighten around her, Aerys's team came with comforting news and told her that they had picked up her guild card on the way. When Yukina saw her lost guild card, she literally lit up with joy. They even asked if her wallet was there. Unfortunately, Aurea said that for now they only had the guild card. She confessed her wallet was snatched, and the thief just threw the cards aside. She, extremely relieved to have found him, said that she wanted to somehow repay him for his help, and Aerys smiled and reassured her, "Don't worry." But she cut in, saying there was no chance of that. Not only could he be taken somewhere else, but he could also be seriously abused. Aerys realized that there really are dark dealers who illegally trade guild cards, and the risks here are much higher than he had imagined. She then boldly stated that she did not have any cash on her, so she would gladly repay him with her body. This remark struck Aerys. She stood stunned and completely confused. Celia naively asked what she meant, but Aerys hesitated and could not explain anything. Feeling that it was still a bit too early for Celia to understand such subtle things, he turned to Yukina.
Are you doing a somersault?
Confused, Celia naively asked what she simply exclaimed sincerely and frankly that she would gladly lend her shoulder for him every time an opportunity arose. Moreover, finally she sincerely, and without hesitation, offered that she would also gladly repay his kindness. But he began to stammer and could not form a proper sentence in her presence, and her face faded as she whispered to herself that it seemed they considered her a burden, a person who was unlikely to bring much benefit in battle. Aerys really seemed genuinely surprised by her remark, but she explained that she meant exactly what she said and resolutely assured them that she was ready to give her heart and soul to help with any and every one of their requests. At that moment, Aerys simply froze. He finally understood the innocent meaning of her careless words. He felt relieved, and a bit nervously, he assured that he was more than delighted, stepping back from her offer of help, and Yukina asked what suddenly embarrassed him so much. Then Yukina suddenly remembered her earlier. She threw out a careless comment and felt her face burn with shame, because she could not meet his gaze directly at all. She could not believe that these words had just slipped out of her mouth in front of a complete stranger. She shyly admitted her mistake and said that she really should be more careful with her words, and Aerys kindly advised her not to dwell on it. Meanwhile, Celia remained completely in her own world, noticing nothing and not realizing the awkward situation. With enthusiasm, she warmly invited Yukina to join their company, eager to set off together on exciting adventures. And all three instantly introduced themselves to each other. Aerys said he was impatient to see Yukina in action, and she replied with the same zeal, eager to test his skills. Aerys announced that he was taking control of the designated testing ground, and the receptionist, without hesitation, offered to lead them to the training area. At the testing field, when Yukina enthusiastically said she would show her formidable magic, Aerys could not help but notice that she looked very confident. She skillfully prepared to cast a spell and swiftly activated the attack Flaming Ray, and released a lightning-fast beam that completely and utterly burned the straw scarecrow. Celia was truly impressed by that display of power, and Aerys enthusiastically praised her absolutely flawless firepower. Moreover, after inspecting the entire testing ground, recently Yukina thoughtfully asked herself whether the exam place had always been such a shabby, rough landscape. She had no idea that the reason for this neglected appearance was standing right next to her. The receptionist later told her everything that happened on the day Aerys took the exam. Moreover, she handed Aerys 300,000 gems for completing the quest and for bringing only 10 golems. The sum was divided between the Aerys and Celia, 150,000 each. Yukina froze upon hearing such a huge amount. Celia modestly remarked that none of those achievements were her merit. And Aerys also earned 70 guild points and even rose to D rank among adventurers. Meanwhile, Yukina simply froze in surprise. He rose from E rank to D rank in just 2 missions, and at that moment, her stomach loudly rumbled. Someone nudged Aerys and he suggested, "Let's go to the cafeteria and have lunch before moving on." But to his surprise, she said with a sad expression that she had no money at all. And it turned out that he hadn't eaten anything since yesterday. This news truly shocked him. With a determined look, Celia firmly grabbed her hand and said that one cannot fight on an empty stomach. She stubbornly said that she would invite her to lunch. Soon they found themselves in a noisy cafeteria, and Yukina devoured every dish placed before her as if she hadn't eaten for an eternity, while Aerys looked at her in surprise, impressed by her incredible appetite. With a joyful smile, Yukina praised the delicious dish and sincerely thanked them both. In turn, Celia admired her incredible appetite. Aerys could not contain her amazement. How dare she say that to her face? It seems Celia and Yukina get along wonderfully. While Aerys thought Yukina seemed like a completely ordinary girl despite her unusual job, he began to ask her, saying that surely offers to join teams must have come to her from everywhere. Considering her respected status as a wise one, he also asked which team she was currently in, but she replied that she was traveling alone and simply could not fit into the team she once belonged to. She said they just had different visions of the future, and he thought that was a fairly common reason to part ways.
Finally finds the switch.
Currently in, but she replied. To this, she admitted that she set out to search for 7 volumes of magic scattered around the world. Aerys wanted to find out for sure, is it true that there is a legendary tome that grants the power to create various spells just by reading it? But she replied that only the truly worthy could do that. Aerys said that it is indeed a treasure that only the wise can truly master. She added that Kay is a famous magical scholar, and showing a neat, clearly written collection of notes, said that these are his research records containing important clues to his books of spells. When Aerys asked who it was about, she admitted that it was her late father, who died when she was still a child. She resolutely swore that as long as she lived, she would definitely collect all of it, and Celia asked why she needed such incredible efforts. The reason was that her mother, who had been carefully taking care of her all this time, had recently died. And when Yukina was stunned by the mixture of loss and an unexpected feeling of freedom, she came across her father's forgotten research. Now Aerys understood why she was so passionately collecting these spell books, and thought that she had carried quite a heavy emotional burden. Yukina also sincerely confessed to him that she really wanted to unlock the magic of resurrection as soon as she collected all 7 volumes. Confused and bewildered, he asked if she really wanted to resurrect her parents, and she admitted that it was one of her reasons. What scared her the most was that she might lose someone dear to her again. The risk called her kind, but she modestly considered herself rather a coward. Aerys knew very well this tearing, unbearable pain of losing a loved one. He was sure in her place he would have acted exactly the same way. But surprisingly, Yukina was held not only by the grief of her parents' death. Her sincere desire to master the magic of resurrection spoke directly of her compassionate heart. She was truly a brave girl who proudly bore the honorable title of sage. And the more Aerys pondered her unwavering determination, the more he wanted her to be by his side. He believed that if she unlocked her immense talent, she would become an invaluable ally to them. She was absolutely essential to his dream to defeat the Demon King. And with a bunch of important thoughts swirling in his head, he asked if she wanted to officially join their team. He invited her to join his squad, promising that together they could defeat the Demon King and at the same time fulfill her dream to travel the world in search of ancient artifacts. Collecting magical tones around the world perfectly matched Yukina's aspirations, so he thought it was a good idea. Although she admitted it was a good offer, she politely declined his proposal. When asked why she refused, she confidently stated that she was simply not made for heroic squads. She was much more comfortable going alone than enduring group dynamics. Aerys politely agreed, saying that assembling a team is not always sunshine and rainbows. Moreover, she exclaimed that with every clash against formidable monsters, there is a considerable chance of saying goodbye forever, hint at the possible loss of a comrade, all during a conversation about the most fearsome demon lord himself. This only strengthened her resolve even more. For 1,000 years, countless groups have bravely challenged the forces of the demon lord, but each time their attempts ended in ruin. Feeling this, Aerys resolutely sought the true reason, asking if she was really afraid of losing her dear allies, and she confirmed without hesitation. She added that although she believed Ori's party would not perish so easily, deep anxiety still troubled her. Although he admitted that a newcomer would hardly survive a direct challenge to the Demon King, he promised with a determined expression that he would prove they were not taking reckless risks. Celia jumped into the conversation and fervently promised to do everything to impress Yukina and convince her to join their team. Moreover, Aerys suggested that Yukina go with them to see how they complete the quest, so she could respond to them more decisively later. Starting all over, they finally managed to take on the D rank quest. The transition from E rank to D is a completely different world, both in difficulty and prestige. One D rank member corresponds to an amazing 10 from E. However, Celia still doubted, were they really ready to take on that mission, since it was a high-level D rank quest, and their formidable task was to exterminate 30 salamanders. Plains swarmed with fierce lizard-like monsters, with strong jaws and powerful legs. Even an average adventurer had no chance in a pack. Aerys confidently said, they cannot just waste their precious time and strength on weak monsters if they truly want to show their combined power. Suddenly Aerys felt an echo of Sylphie's voice in his head. She, appearing, asked if she could leave that world. Yukina froze in surprise upon seeing that delicate child. I noticed that the street air always refreshes and invigorates, and greeted Yukina. This prompted Celia to note that even hiding in the realm of spirits, she could still keep track of everything. Interested in the newcomer, Sylph playfully twirled around Yukina, and Yukina asked who that child was. Aerys named her and introduced her as a spirit, asking Yukina to be gentle with the Sylphs. She has been through very hard times. Although Aerys initially hesitated to show Salfa in front of Yukina, he knew well hiding her forever would not work if he truly wanted to take Yukina into his team. The scene smoothly shifted to the Burgundian forest near the plains, where Aerys, as if nothing had happened, suggested to Celia to finish off the enemy first, and she froze at this unexpected instruction. Effectively, she rushed to him and hugged him tightly, desperately trying to contradict his decision, and this made Aerys blush slightly. He knew she could handle it herself, but he was worried that her nervousness would prevent her from showing her best side, and Yukina, watching them, quietly whispered to Sylph, asking if they were a couple. Still blushing, Aerys gently assured Celia that they were a team, and he would definitely come to her aid if she ever found herself in danger. As soon as Sylvia heard his soothing words, she seemed to come alive and immediately agreed to carry out his order. Soon Celia boldly stood before the threatening monster, ready to strike. She struck, and as soon as the monster sensed her presence, she lunged at the beast without any hesitation. The enemy's evasion speed was slightly higher than those encountered in E-rank quests, so in a simple speed duel Celia was clearly at a disadvantage. But as a sword saint, she had lightning-fast reflexes and sharp instincts. And in hand-to-hand combat, predicting the opponent's moves was the true, absolute key to victory. Her lightning reflexes allowed her to dodge the monster's attacks at the last moment as they rushed at her with incredible speed. With furious speed, she easily dealt with them using quick, precise strikes, and Celia finally repelled the monstrous salamander with a powerful blast. Aerys enthusiastically praised her impressive skills, and Yukina, seeing such formidable power, was left completely speechless. He turned to Yukina and asked if she was surprised and still worried. She only shook her head and asked what kind of strange training it must be to achieve such mastery. To her surprise, he admitted that Celia had started special training only a few days ago and still had room to grow, which completely stunned Yukina. Then it was time for Aerys to show his refined skills and incredible abilities. He explained that their team acted as a single unit. They always carefully planned the battle strategy before the fight, and while Celia cut down enemies with her sword, he swiftly destroyed monsters with his magic. In his assessment, their formidable squad together matched C-rank adventurers. They could confidently demonstrate their skills against C-rank or even high-rank challenges, but while he enthusiastically praised his formidable group, Yukina tried to intervene and say something important, but he paid no attention to her words. The words faded. His mind was completely consumed by an unwavering desire to prove that none of their companions would die, and this directly touched her deepest fear, losing dear allies, in his carefully planned first step. He covered himself with a powerful reinforcement, and at the same moment, unleashed weakening spells on the enemy horde. And he was going to release Hellfire, a devastating attack of incredible power that would force the fireballs to collide brutally and explode with stunning force. This fusion spell would usually consume a colossal amount of magical energy, as much as even the most experienced mages could not normally produce together. However, thanks to his unique enchantment magic, he could skillfully reshape the very nature of the spell and thereby single-handedly unleash its full power. Aerys was so absorbed in showing off his immense powers before Yukina that he did not hear a single word she said. He admitted that they too would not escape unscathed, but cunningly created a barrier to shield himself from lurking danger and carefully put his plan into action. The huge, growing explosion swept across the entire area, instantly destroying every one of the monsters. But as soon as the dust from the explosion settled, Aerys turned back to see if Yukina was all right. He saw that she had fainted and collapsed to the ground. A little later, when Yukina regained consciousness, Aerys asked if she had really seen his abilities in action. He admitted that maybe he had gone a bit too far just to convince her of his formidable power. Meanwhile, she unconditionally acknowledged Celia's strength, but persistently repeated Aerys is on a completely different level. On the other hand, she was sure she did not belong to them, convinced that she would only drag everyone down, but Celia intervened without hesitation. She admitted that even she, when she first met Aerys, felt like a burden, but Yukina said that in reality, Celia's past experience in the party and her rigorous training were much more important. But she shuddered when Aerys said that Celia had also been a lone traveler before she met him. He said he had a keen eye for people with real potential, and asked Yukina to believe him at least a little. It seemed he succeeded. He suggested she try to defeat the salamander herself. Yukina agreed almost without protest, and she created a glowing magical sphere in her hand. She released a powerful beam toward the monster. But one shot was not enough. She quickly fired another beam and finally destroyed the creature. Watching in awe as she demonstrated her magical powers, he said that both quality and quantity were top-notch. She had genuine raw talent, but there was still room to grow. He explained that usually, to master magic, relentless training is required and although intuition and experience gained with difficulty were unquestionably important, there was also a tricky aspect to it. He used the same magical powers and techniques as she did, and released a much more powerful explosion that easily dealt with several salamanders at once. Once he took out the fearsome claws of fallen monsters as proof of the hunt, and explained that he preserved the primal magical power at the same level as hers, simply adding a few refined techniques. Instead, Yukina's jaw dropped in complete surprise when she encountered magical power 3 times stronger than her own. Step by step, he broke down the technique so she could fully understand, starting with fire beams and explaining that all advanced magic actually consists of simple spells, but unfortunately, much of the magical power is lost in such combinations. So if they manage to strengthen this connection, they will easily get rid of the waste. She quickly grasped his explanation and added that almost 70 of the initial power was lost during the transformation. However, Aerys was confident she could withstand all that magic and amplify its power almost threefold. She considered these ideas only theoretical assumptions and doubted whether it would work in practice at all. He answered directly and honestly. She could simply use binding magic to smoothly combine the spells, but she was not satisfied and asked further if he intended to activate it additionally and if that would increase magic consumption. However, he objected. He flicked his finger, and suddenly a tiny spark of fire appeared, saying that it does not create fire or water anew, it just uses a fraction of the magic needed for ignition. But when she inquired about the exact combination of binding magic, she was simply shocked when he casually said that it was just basic magic. He also said that in his previous team, everyone expected as if several people were simultaneously casting buffs, saying that it was quite a common thing. She charmingly intervened and subtly reminded the confused women that this seemingly turned the usual notions of magic upside down. It was then that he grabbed a stick and roughly sketched a human silhouette on the ground, showing an intricate magical outline inside, and explained that it could be imagined as a system with 2 states, 1 when it is active and 0 when inactive. He continued, all magic can be precisely constructed from combinations of zeros and ones, and with each additional branch, they could effectively turn on and off individual segments. Finally, this intricate idea began to dawn on her. She said that magic would theoretically have 48,816 combinations if the branch was increased. Her face twisted with realization. Already over 1,000 combinations with just 10 branches, and over 1,000,000 with 20, as if all magic could be explained by these tangled combinations. A spark of determination lit in her eyes, and she rapidly flipped through the pages of her book. Then she resolutely set about all the magical spells, using the newly understood binary combinations of zeros and ones. Her face shone with delight as she realized that she could now master countless applications and that the possibilities were almost limitless. Her excitement reminded Aerys that she truly was the brilliant daughter of a scientist. She then asked again, is it really no longer necessary to collect spell books for resurrection magic? Aerys gently declined and said that what he had managed to decipher was only a crumb of how magic really works. In ancient magic, there were still mysteries he could not fully unravel to demonstrate the power of connection magic. He carefully drew combinations of zeros and ones on the ground and advised her to try this exact order first. Agreeing, Yukina cast 2 simple spells and flawlessly used communication magic to combine them exactly as she was taught. Then she unleashed a barrage of huge, fierce fireballs, creating a colossal explosion that she had never managed to achieve before. Pure delight lit up her face when she saw that she could control her true powers. Shortly after, she cleared the entire area of formidable monsters. They were returning when Aerys sincerely thanked Yukina for her much-needed help, but she modestly replied that she owed him a favor she would have done the same in twice the time. She, hesitating slightly, asked if they would officially accept her into their team, and their faces instantly lit up with joy. Celia hugged her tightly and joyfully. She said with a satisfied smile that now she had a new mom. And he would also like to talk about the quest now. Asked if they would officially. At the guild house, the receptionist was genuinely surprised. Yukina, who had always been very reluctant to join a team, finally agreed, and meanwhile Celia said with joyful excitement that Aerys really knows how to attract people. The receptionist carefully examined the claws they returned with clear evidence of hunting, but although that was quite enough, she somehow lacked excitement. But Yukina admitted, the magic she taught her was so incredibly powerful that it accidentally wiped out T. What remained of those monstrous salamanders? The receptionist said with a smile that Aerys was truly unparalleled in teaching, and then casually added that both Celia and Yukina were simply full of talent. This allowed them to learn much faster. He believed that a narrow perspective would never truly reveal a person's full talent. If you only look at what is nearby, you won't see the moon in the distance. But if you remove your self-imposed frames of attention, you can even clearly see the distant moon. Yukina was delighted by this analogy. She also asked if they had already decided on the party's name, and he, after a moment of thought, admitted there was still no suitable name and he kept it in his mind. After long consideration, Aerys quickly registered the name of their team, Infinity.
And said she could help him learn more about that world.
Moment of thought, admitted there was still no suitable name and he kept it in his mind. After long consideration, Morning and Celia, without hesitation, suggested that she live in their room for now. Hearing this, Yukina explained and asked again if they would really be in the same room. She looked at him clearly and inquisitively, and he, stammering, said that it was only because of foolish and overly persistent insistence. But Yukina still agreed to stay. And Rest thought to himself, they definitely need to move to a bigger place soon. At that moment, suspicious people in hoods suddenly ran up to them and shouted that Yukina had supposedly lost her guild card. But when she checked, she realized it definitely wasn't hers.
The interested hunter notes that the boy looks younger.
Up to them and shouted that one of the threatening men then ordered Aerys to raise his hands and quietly approach. Aerys asked why they appeared so suddenly, and Yukina coldly replied that those thugs were probably trading guild cards on the black market. Seeing that she hit the mark, the bandit admitted she was very perceptive.
And what happened to him did not concern him at all.
Guild cards on the black. Aerys instantly remembered the boy they had seen earlier and thought, did they come to avenge their fallen comrade? But the thug just smiled and replied that Aerys was not very clever in this matter. He did not hide it, the boy was just a pawn to be used and discarded. And what happened to him did not concern him at all. He abruptly shouted that Aerys's report about them had gotten them into serious trouble, and Aerys, without blinking, calmly said that they were ready for the consequences of conducting suspicious business in the capital. This only further inflamed the thug's anger, and he noted that he could simply sell Rust as 2 fine ladies to cover their losses, and that Aerys would surely regret making them his enemies. However, Aerys calmly stated that it was they who had made a fatal mistake. At that very moment, Celia grabs her sword again, and Yukina feels her magical power returning, and quickly subdued those bandits almost without resistance. Their bewildered leader froze in amazement, seeing the lightning-fast reaction of these women, but Aerys sneaked up from behind and cunningly grabbed him. And he said that Celia and Yukina were simply too strong for his thugs, and tightly tying all three of them with a rope, he ordered Celia to call the royal guard. Meanwhile, the leader hastily offered Aerys more money than the guild paid him if he agreed to go with them. But Horus simply admitted, for his actions, he received nothing at all from the guild. In fact, Aerys preferred a peaceful society without any illegal deals on the black market. He also proudly declared that he worked for his own benefit and principles, not just for money. Shortly after arriving at the inn, Celia sharply asked why Aerys did not help her when the attacker took her hostage, and Horus said he thought she could handle it without anyone's help. However, her face still had a sulky expression, and she cunningly steered the conversation in another direction. Horus announced that they needed to discuss how to divide the reward. Yukina replied that the criteria for contribution were shaky, and usually they divided the reward depending on each person's contribution. Aerys pondered, although the damage inflicted more often benefits the attackers, according to his principles, the support role should also receive a worthy reward. To be fair, Aerys announced, 10% for party expenses, and the rest will be divided equally among themselves. But Yukina immediately objected to his decision, indignantly saying that it was completely unfair to him after all. He unquestionably made the greater contribution in the fight. Even with this decision, it was still more than he received during his time with the party of heroes. And Aerys simply replied that everything would even out if they both became equally strong. Inspired by his words, the two women felt a surge of motivation and decided to work hard together. Moreover, Horus also suggested that we, as a team, pay for housing together and move to a bigger inn. At that moment, Yukina instantly pointed to the bed and excitedly asked if Aerys and Celia were really together in the same bed, and Celia confirmed without hesitation. She also said that during his rest, he often hugged her so tightly that she barely managed to break free. In contrast, her rest was still shocked that he really did that to her when she was in rest. Meanwhile, Yukina cozily settled on the velvet bed and admitted that she hadn't felt such a lively evening and energetic day in a long time. Aerys gently patted her on the head, but immediately felt a cold gaze directed straight at him. Meeting Celia's eyes, he lost his words and didn't know how to justify his action. Jealous of Yukina, she flopped onto the bed and suddenly asked him to pet her the same way, and he froze in surprise. Having no choice, he settled between them and immediately felt their soft bodies pressed against him, and he blushed with embarrassment. The next morning, Yukina greeted him, and seeing the expression on his face, noticed that it seemed he had rested little that night. Only Aerys knew the real reason why he could not rest peacefully. Soon they reached the dining hall, where a huge crowd had gathered. A note was stuck on the gates informing everyone that the dining hall was closed due to an acute shortage of supplies. As soon as Aerys stepped inside, he immediately felt a terrible stench that enveloped everything around. They went further and discovered that the entire stock of ingredients had spoiled, and the chef grimly reported that all the food had gone bad overnight. Looking at the rotten food, Yukina instantly understood. The spoilage was caused by a disruption of magic. The natural magic flowing through the earth sometimes goes out of control, and there is a high chance that it accidentally turns into decay magic. When Aerys looked into the pantry again, he could not believe his eyes. The entire stock had spoiled overnight. To everyone's surprise, Ors grabbed a rotten apple and tried to bite it. Celia stood completely bewildered, but Yukina, with a sharp gaze, advised her to look more closely. And to her surprise, the rotten apple miraculously turned into a fresh one. Aerys then realized that his restoration spell could return the food to the state it had the previous night unspoiled, and with one smooth motion, the entire rotten area instantly restored to its former beauty. The sad expression on the chef's face instantly blossomed into pure joy. Light illuminated him, and he sincerely thanked them. When asked how he could repay them, Aerys only smiled. Truly delicious food would be the best reward for their efforts, but he had spent so much life energy that he noticeably stumbled and barely stood on his feet. So Celia and Yukina immediately ran up to help him. Yukina resolutely said that after such a powerful spell, his magic reserves were undoubtedly depleted, and advised to eat well and rest to quickly get back on his feet. Seeing the urgent need, the chief instantly ordered his colleagues to help him prepare nutritious dishes without any delay. Soon they comfortably settled at the dining table, and Yukina, with slight surprise, noted that even Aerys could exhaust his magic, to which he modestly replied that he was also an ordinary person like them. He pleaded with the chief not to tell anyone that he miraculously revived the ingredients, but the chief said that for him, it was a great chance to become famous. Meanwhile, Celia proudly stated that it was precisely his modesty that made him so incredibly cool. Aerys gloomily explained that if this magical disorder really permeated the entire area, then the situation was most likely extremely bad, and it was completely impossible for him to restore everything from all sides alone. So the chief also agreed to keep silent about it. When everyone finally left the dining hall, Yukina did not hide her surprise. How did it happen that all the ingredients spoiled at the same time? They also admitted that the magical disturbance was deeply troubling. It was said that the magical wrath of the earth was a harbinger of a magical catastrophe, and from this, there would likely be severe consequences. Then they headed to the guild house, and surprisingly, all the guild members were already gathered before them. The registrar, shining with joy, announced that Aerys had easily, like a miracle, revived the spoiled ingredients, and clear traces of enchantment magic were found in them. Aerys stood stunned and could not believe his eyes. Everyone suddenly learned about his special charm magic. But one of them said that he had heard rumors about a new magician who would join the hero team. A devastating blow knocks him off his feet. Aerys stood stunned and could not believe his eyes. Special charm. Then he quickly returned to his teammates and suggested immediately looking for new requests. Moreover, he was overwhelmed with relief. Someone had already taken his place in the party of heroes, and now he would finally be free from former comrades constantly following him. As soon as they stepped over the threshold, they were stunned by the strangely few application forms on the wall they allowed guessed, whether this was a consequence of the recent magical commotion. Although his Aerys tried to pull out a form, they all heard aloud. From outside came a loud, ominous knocking. They were completely stunned. Aerys immediately rushed to check the commotion, but nothing was visible through the dense crowd. They decided to go upstairs and observe from above. He froze in horror. He came across a newly built dungeon for gorillas, ominously limited by a timer. Terrible consequence monsters would have overwhelmed the entire village if the magical barrier had fallen in just 3 hours. Aerys said with a sad expression that this was exactly the type of dungeon that tragically appeared in his hometown 6 years ago. Although the hero and reinforcements from the capital eventually suppressed it then, it happened only after the entire village was completely destroyed. This time Aerys prioritized saving every living creature. He sincerely wanted to value each life, so he instantly made a plan to lead everyone to the neighboring village within those crucial 3 hours. As soon as Celia and Yukina set off, he immediately activated detection magic, spreading it throughout the surrounding area, and instantly increased everyone's movement speed. Right after that, the group was enveloped by sudden lightness, and they seemed filled with energy to run much faster. Stunned, Yukina asked if he had really granted everyone this powerful spell, and Aerys replied that such a level of magical exertion was no problem for him. 6 years ago, he decided, if such a tragedy struck again, he would stop it at any cost. It was then that the receptionist appeared, and warning about the sudden emergence of a dungeon, urgently requested to immediately deploy their hunting party, but it was already clear that Aerys's team would go. He admitted that they did not want to be just a hunting group, they aimed to act as an elite squad. Surprised by his audacious proposal, she asked again if he really wanted to act alone and warned him. Do not be too reckless, even if you possess great power. He explained that these monsters did not act in groups, so they would have to deal with each one individually, concluding that a small elite team is much more effective than a large group of ordinary hunters. He also said that he was not really alone. His dear friends Celia and Yukina would have his back. Upwards, the receptionist begged them to be careful, and Aerys ordered his men to quickly bring all the necessary potions. Before moving further into the crowd to help, to his surprise, suddenly his former party comrades appeared, and Nardo said that the civilians would follow their example, but Yukina sharply intervened and exclaimed that there was no such rule and they had not yet received any concrete orders from the capital. But Nardo, with a note of self-importance, declared that they were the ones in command here. Outraged by his insolent remark, Aerys called him incredible, saying how he could still overestimate himself like that, and with a contemptuous smile, added that in fact they were the ones ahead. Nardo snapped back, "Do you want to selfishly take all the credit for yourself?" He fervently assured that if that were really the case, he would immediately go to the dungeon. But the others, wisely calming Nardo, said there was no point in rushing. They had not even gathered enough supplies yet. Despite everything, Nardo decisively ordered his comrades to move forward and enter the dungeon. As they walked, Yukina teasingly said that the hero party should be truly ashamed if they were falling behind in conquering the dungeon, and Aerys could not help but pity the new blessing mage, who would now have to support them. Meanwhile, deep in the dungeon, While the hero party was engaged in a fierce, chaotic battle with terrible monsters, Nardo wailed in pure despair because the damage they were taking was so severe, as if they were completely defenseless. He fiercely demanded to know what was happening, to which the new mage said he was putting all his strength into it, and his enhancement magic was fully active, but Nardo involuntarily exclaimed that Eurus had always done much more than he was managing now. Another comrade intervened, wisely advising Nardo not to argue with his ally and sternly warning that if he carelessly lost vigilance, he would definitely suffer. Overcome with desperate anxiety for her, the team used their various skills and magic to fight the monsters inside, battling recklessly. Nardo skillfully cornered the terrible creature and immediately ordered Cryony to use her powerful offensive magic. But she was already busy healing another wounded comrade with her precious healing magic. The monster swiftly swung its huge tail, and Nardo dashed across the ground at a furious speed. Meanwhile, Cranid, barely containing his tension, admitted that they had no magic left at all. The rookie asked if they even had an antidote, because basilisk poison is a deadly toxin that mercilessly races against time. In his blind recklessness, Nardo allowed the disguised monster saliva, dripping right in front of him, to fall on his open hand, and this provoked a strong reaction, causing the hand to quickly swell. He desperately begged someone to give him the antidote, but Cranid anxiously explained that they no longer had any healing potions left and advised to immediately get out of the dungeon. Moreover, the new mage said he would have brought more supplies if he had known about such serious consequences. Soon, Aerys' squad confidently stepped into the dungeon, and Yukina quietly whispered with hope that the party of heroes would not start complaining when they saw them. Aerys replied that they could not afford the luxury of complaining. Suddenly, a monstrous roar echoed through the dungeon, and everyone present instantly became alert. As they advanced further, they saw that the heroes were in even worse condition than before, and a terrible basilisk emerged before them. Aerys admitted that they should have arrived a little earlier. Activating his magic circle, Aerys swiftly released a piercing fire shot and fired a blazing beam that rushed straight at the creature and left it completely motionless. Celia and Yukina praised his powerful skills again, and his former partners simply froze speechless with admiration, seeing how this was happening. Cranid called him vile, he slipped out of the party, and now he flaunts such stunning battle magic. In response, he calmly repeated the same harsh words with which Nardo humiliated him, saying that everything was already decided, and there would be no explanations. He was dismissed. He revealed that Flame Pearson Shot is an advanced form of blessed magic, which he first tried immediately after his exile. And most importantly, pulling out a vital healing potion from the inventory slot, he said that this was exactly what they urgently needed at that critical moment, and when Nardo saw the antidote, his face lit up with incredible joy. Celia wondered if Eurus had foreseen this situation in advance and prepared those necessary potions. Aerys simply explained that the partisan dungeon is an extremely isolated place where magic melts before your eyes from incredible consumption, and most monsters are aggressively elemental. If potions were lacking, deadly poison or paralysis could strike them, and ordinary treatment would hardly provide relief. They risked becoming helplessly immobile. With a firm expression, he admitted that it was also his first time stepping into this dungeon, and the environment and fighting techniques of its inhabitants were completely unfamiliar to him, and also advised them to act prudently in everything they did. He made a gesture for them to move forward, clearly showing which way the exit portal was. To his great surprise, Nardo spoke directly to him, his voice strangely sincere, when he said he truly counted on him. Aerys had no idea he would ever hear such words from Nardo, and he even thought that perhaps Nardo had finally faced harsh truth and therefore became unexpectedly frank. In a decisive tone, Aerys assured him to take everything upon himself. Meanwhile, as they were leaving, Celia asked with burning curiosity whether Eurus had already predicted the exact features and types of monsters in that dungeon, and Eurus apologized to both of them for dragging them into such danger. And he was still deeply troubled that the once world-famous team of heroes was now in such a state. Yukina muttered that they were so obsessed with appearances that they couldn't even protect their own comrades. But Aerys calmly replied that this was still his old territory. Hearing this, Yukina was bewilderedly surprised. He turned out to be from that very same group of heroes, and Eurus suddenly realized he had never told her about it. He immediately apologized to Yukina if his past had somehow made her feel uncomfortable. She calmly replied that she rather felt relieved it was good that he was also an outsider like her, and that she liked him just as he was, not only because he was a hero. Aerys's face clearly flushed at her words, and her cheeks also reddened when she hurriedly clarified what she meant as a person. And at that very moment, Celia suddenly appeared between them, both flinched from surprise. He pointed forward and said that at the destination, there were many doors waiting. As they walked through those numerous doors, Celia asked if they could just hurriedly open any doors, but Aerys assured her. Simultaneously activating his zone scan, he instantly detected a swarm of dangerous monsters lurking behind those doors. Yukina decided that they definitely wouldn't make it if they opened every door and listened to foolish advice, so for now they just keep moving forward. They advanced a little further and came across majestic doors with several keyholes. It seemed to them that the dungeon boss was hiding deeper, beyond this formidable barrier, and to reach the doors they would need many keys. There were so many keyholes that it immediately became clear the keys were cleverly hidden behind those numerous doors, behind each of which one was concealed. Celia firmly said there was no choice, they would have to defeat the monsters at each gate, and just as they set off there, Aerys hurriedly stopped them. He accidentally tugged at Yukina's belt. She blushed and immediately warned him not to grab her in such a place. Because they needed to collect as many as 20 keys, Aerys explained that there was no time for such a prolonged process. It was a complicated process, and the usual method was completely unsuitable. It's even funny to wonder if there is some hidden way to open those doors. But Aerys revealed that everything turned out to be much simpler than they had imagined. He formed a powerful magic circle and released a massive burst of fire directly at those formidable doors. They instantly shattered from his power. Meanwhile, Celia and Yukina were completely stunned. They did not expect him to resort to such brute force. When the doors opened, a formidable, terrifying dragon stood before them. Wasting no time, Aerys instantly drew Dragon's attention to himself. He swiftly ordered Celia to attack from the rear, and Yukina to skillfully cover them from behind. The mighty jaws of Dragon opened wide, spewing a fierce stream of fire that engulfed the entire area. Wasting no time, Aerys appeared behind him and fired an accurate shot that passed through the flames. Yes, it was a formidable monster, but its incredibly hard scales did not have a single scratch. By order, Celia stepped out from behind, and with a precise strike of her sturdy sword, she struck the monster. However, just as Aerys was praising her skill, the dragon cunningly took advantage of the opportune moment and grabbed her while she was distracted. Overcome with panic, Aerys quickly prepared for another desperate attack, but Yukina's piercing voice ordered Celia to retreat. At the same time, she unleashed her powerful offensive magic towards Dragon. Did Celia survive, and was Drayden lay wounded. Pausing for a moment on the ground, Aerys took this chance, rushed at the beast, and delivered a precise, powerful blow. The mighty Dragon was finally defeated. News of their victory spread throughout the region. They stood outside, breathing a sigh of relief, finally cleared the dungeon. Yukina, filled with pride, declared, "This is undoubtedly the fastest record in history. Aerys passed such a difficult dungeon in a flash." But he, smiling warmly, said that he definitely did not do it alone. All three overcame it together, harmoniously, as one whole. He admitted if it weren't for Celia's precise strike on the seams of Dragon's scales, he would never have noticed its vulnerable spot. And without Yukina's timely help, Celia confessed that she would have been torn to pieces. Stammering, Yukina modestly said she did nothing special, just attacked from behind, but Aerys still praised her for the very necessary help, and her cheeks reddened with embarrassment. He emphasized once again that in the dungeon, where magic was used incredibly intensively. From such a distance, only a few adventurers could effectively strike with magic. He gently took her hand and offered a magical restorative spell, and she shyly and sincerely thanked him. Jealous of their closeness, Celia hurriedly inserted herself between them and firmly grabbed Aerys, dramatically exclaiming that she was in pain and desperately needed his immediate help. Meanwhile, Yukina could not help but giggle. The energy of their bright party was so lively. She quietly spoke to her deceased parents, thinking in her soul that she could really get along well with these people. She gently thanked both her mothers, Celia and Yukina, for allowing her to go outside, because it seemed everyone had already been taken out of the village. She mischievously muttered under her breath that now she could finally steal whatever she wanted, but Celia instantly scolded her for such thoughts.
It was contagious and took the lives of many people.
Because it seemed Seeing them so close, he jokingly remarked that Aerys had successfully stolen the hearts of her mothers, but blushing, explained that their closeness was simply an effective way to restore magic. She also told him that although it was normal for Celia, it was extremely rude for Yukina. Squinting, the boy sees a rather old monk. Explained that their At that moment, Yukina sharply turned around and assured him that she was fine now, and Aerys explained to Self that there really was some distance between him and Yukina. Celia called him hopelessly inattentive. He thought to himself that cooperation with Yukina was only for their common goals. That day, having overcome the infamous partisan dungeon, they took another decisive step toward the great goal to return peace to the world. He felt that together with Celia and Yukina, he must continue to grow for the sake of ultimately defeating the mighty demon king. Meanwhile, the royal guards quietly whispered in the corner of the village, debating whether the hero's squad should have already retreated, while others advised to immediately report everything to the palace. The scene smoothly shifted to the royal palace of the male kingdom, where the respected King Floyd's husband said that they needed to choose a new perfect hero, truly unique for their nation. The minister countered, even if they are heroes of the Alliance, finding adventures that surpass them is a real challenge. Floyd confidently said, "It has already been proven such incredible people did indeed exist." 3 days after the Eurus group defeated the dangerous partisan dungeon, they set off to the noisy market, where the shop owner immediately recognized them as true heroes who successfully overcame the recent crisis. She moved closer and asked if Aerys was really that former hero, and if she really had to keep it a secret. This made Aerys realize that almost everyone had already figured out his past. Celia asked for 4 loaves of bread, and when the shop owner saw her, she was clearly impressed and called her a beauty. Jokingly, they asked if she was Aerys's girl, which clearly embarrassed Aerys, but Celia calmly denied it and proudly introduced herself as the sword saint of their group. Hearing this, Letty generously offered her the whole bag of bread instead of just 4, and Celia's face instantly blossomed with joy. Another merchant jumped into the conversation, assuring that the village miraculously came to life thanks to their heroic efforts, and even the fruits supposedly became much juicier. Yukina, as always scholarly, explained that the closure of the dungeon significantly stabilized the local magical flow, and the merchant, fascinated by her vast knowledge, praised her and asked who she was. Aerys appeared, proudly introduced her as Wise, and said that she largely contributed to the recent success of the group. The seller was delighted. He swiftly extended to her his juiciest fruits as a sign of gratitude, and instantly the shopkeepers and vendors throughout the market showered them with gifts and sincere thanks. It seems Celia and Yukina were truly basking in the attention and gratitude pouring upon them. Moreover, the seller recalled. And they talked about the Nardo group, saying they strolled confidently through the village, but as soon as the decisive moment to help came, they immediately retreated. Another added that the Aerys group was much more reliable. The entire market unanimously and wholeheartedly thanked them for coming to help promptly and decisively. Later, when they finally broke free from the huge crowd, a sigh of relief was heard. This made Yukina ask if he was tired. He said he had never had such an experience before, so he was not quite used to public admiration yet, and when they arrived at the guild house, the administrator immediately apologized for calling him so abruptly when he was supposed to rest, and Eurus replied that he had rested enough in 3 days and immediately asked what the urgent matter was. She frankly said she had an important letter addressed specifically to Aerys and ordered him to go to the inner room. At that very moment, Aerys clearly felt that his past as a former hero was now known to everyone. While the receptionist was escorting them, Celia emphasized that usually no one was allowed in there. But the receptionist openly said that it was their private office. She informed the group that after they had swiftly completed the dungeon task, a letter arrived yesterday directly from the capital. They delivered it extremely quickly, definitely by carrier pigeon, so when Eurus asked who sent it, it was extremely important to them. She admitted that the letter was from King Floyd of the Male Kingdom, a revelation that truly stunned him. When he skimmed the letter, it clearly stated that the king personally congratulated them on the lightning-fast and decisive conquest of the dungeon, and the letter also announced the imminent dissolution of the allied hero party and the simultaneous creation of an independent hero party specifically for the Male Kingdom. And most importantly, it announced that the respected leader of the new hero team would be Aerys Falres himself. Celia and Yukina burst with joy when they heard this. They believed that their incredible feats in the dungeon were finally officially recognized. And Self also appeared on the spot, smiling and noting that although she knew little about such matters, it sounded very impressive. The girl at the reception assured that it was quite logical, considering Aerys's incredible achievements, but the real miracle was that she was directly nominated by the cane itself. But Celia said with surprise, "Why create a completely new party if we can just take Aerys into the one that already exists?" In response, Yukina said that the current party was merely a coalition, essentially a multinational army funded by neighboring countries. But due to a long pause without major battles against the formidable Demon King, more and more countries refused to provide money. And as a result, funds catastrophically ran out, so talented adventurers gathered less and less often. And on top of that, since the Gorilla Dungeon appeared in Aerys's hometown 6 years ago, everything has gotten much worse. Natural disasters could now erupt anywhere in the world, so saving people and restoring the aftermath became more important than hunting the Demon King, and countries began spending considerable funds on their urgent needs. Moreover, the person at the reception announced that the allied party of heroes had left after their recent retreat from the dungeon, and it seemed the king had decisively decided to create his own independent team of heroes solely to protect the kingdom. Celia seemed to have finally grasped the seriousness of the situation and proudly exclaimed that it was finally Aerys' time, while Eurus hesitantly called it a very positive interpretation. Besides, he said that his true goal was to defeat the formidable Demon King, and joining the hero squad was only a temporary detour. Still, he replied that the bitter and painful memories of the former hero team were incredibly hard to erase from memory. This made the receptionist ask in surprise if something was bothering him, and to her even greater surprise, Eurus inquired if there was even the slightest chance that he could refuse the honorable nomination to the new hero party, and without backing down, clarified if the role of leader was meant. But he explained that he was talking about becoming a hero in general, and this confession stunned everyone in the room. A deafening silence fell. She was still stunned and stammering, said that refusing a royal decree had never happened before, while Celia and Yukina desperately tried to convince him, saying that rejecting such an honor was a huge loss, and that he still had to participate despite obvious hesitation. Meanwhile, Aerys could not understand how he would even explain all his tangled feelings to everyone. Meanwhile, in the grand audience hall of the Male Kingdom, Galeas Sheffield, Fura Forrest, Souls Astria, and Miguel Brewer. They were solemnly appointed as the new honorary heroes of the Male Kingdom. The king, personally. Then Floyd raised the topic of the party leader. Galeas quickly calmed him down, his voice burning with confidence. He would handle it easily. He had led the A-rank squad for years and was completely confident in his leadership abilities. But Floyd calmly noted that the leader had already been finally chosen, although he was not here at that moment. Galeas immediately apologized for speaking out of turn and immediately asked who this leader was. Floyd replied that it was none other than Aerys Falres. Galeas immediately recognized him as a skilled wizard from the former party of heroes, and this discovery clearly stunned him. Floyd cheerfully noted that although it had not yet been officially announced, he had heard that Joris had single-handedly taken the partisan dungeon. Floyd proudly said that even after stepping down from the role of hero, he still tirelessly tried to save people, and his spirit and innate strength were truly extraordinary. Floyd considered him extremely worthy of such an honorable title. Meanwhile, Galeas broke out in a cold sweat, realizing that the leader of the party of heroes possessed incredible power. He knew, under the direct royal name, the leader would be given stunning power and influence both inside the party and beyond its borders. Galeas could not understand why he was not chosen. Everyone recognized his skill. He had led many teams to victory for years, and it was humiliating for him to step onto that big stage and work under the command of some guy named Aerys. He firmly believed that if he had been the first to find the dungeon, he would have been chosen as leader, not Rusa. Meanwhile, Fira asked if the group leader could ever change. And Floyd replied that although he was not thinking about it now, this topic occasionally comes up in court discussions once every few years. Then he announced that in a few days Aerys would arrive in the capital and officially join them, and ordered everyone to stay in standby until then. Galeas increasingly thought with indignation that the king was simply using the retreat of the previous party of heroes as a convenient excuse, and was now somewhat overestimating Aerys. Moreover, he thought with deep resentment that if Aerys simply were not around, the king would have no choice but to choose him for this position. When he left the capital, a sinister oath was born in his mind. He would definitely make sure that Eurus would not stand in his way, although he did not yet know what kind of man he really was.